Chapter 344 Wang Shi drowns herself. Extra. With the second prince's order, the eldest prince was detained in the imperial prison. Compared to where the second prince had been detained, as someone who had committed the crime of killing father and ruler, the treatment that he received was far worse. Everyone looked at him as if he was a stray dog or a wild rodent, and they were all too eager to beat him to death. Even he had lost any will to fight. Since he had made that sort of choice back then, he was prepared for today's outcome. The only thing that he felt any resentment over was that Yin Shuhua had chosen to wash his hands of the matter. In Qinghua Palace, the flowers were in full bloom. A noble lady in palace attire collapsed at the bottom of some stairs. Her red brocade dress contrasted with her pale complexion. Lost. My son actually lost. Your Highness. A palace maid knelt on the ground, neither daring to step forward to help her up nor daring to say any words to comfort her. No matter what was said, it would all be pointless. The eldest prince had already been locked up in the imperial prison, and all of the civil and military officials in court recognized his guilt. He was completely powerless. It was likely that someone would soon remember the eldest prince's birth mother, and someone would be sent to apprehend her. Imperial consort Xian lay on the cold marble with a false smile on her face. She pressed her face against the ground. My son lost. There's no longer any chance of him winning. The palace maid, who had been serving at her side for a long time, was on the verge of tears at this sight. She did not know whether she was heartbroken for imperial consort Xian's poor spirits, or if she was crying because she would also be dragged down by their downfall. Imperial consort Xian listened to the sobbing and just stared wide-eyed, as all sorts of images drifted through her mind. She remembered when she first entered the palace. She had been wearing a blue jacket and skirt. Standing in a group of beautiful girls, she did not stand out. However, Emperor Ning had chosen her. He said that the moment he first saw her, he felt that she had a gentle bearing and would surely become a virtuous imperial consort. Eventually, she would bear Emperor Ning his eldest son, and every member of the imperial harem looked at her with fear. Although the late empress occupied the central palace, she would envy her in the dead of night. When the eldest prince was 3 or 4 years old and in good health, Emperor Ning conferred her the title of imperial consort Xian, making her second in the imperial harem behind only the empress. Her luck was great. In her second year, the empress had given birth to a son, but he died of sickness not long after, and the inner palace treated imperial consort Xian as its leader. These vivid memories of her and Emperor Ning behaving like a loving couple flashed through her mind. They had enjoyed so many years of peaceful harmony between them. Now, it had been completely ruined. Emperor Ning was dead, and her son had become a rebel. As someone who had aided him, she would not be able to avoid being implicated. She closed her eyes, and hot tears fell to the marble floor before quickly turning to ice. The sound of urgent footsteps came from outside, as a eunuch rushed in. Your Highness, Your Highness. It's bad. The imperial guards have come to arrest Your Highness. The palace maids in the hall were rushing about frantically, while imperial consort Xian suddenly opened her eyes and slowly stood up with the help of the palace maid at her side. Arrest me? This one is the one responsible for managing the inner palace and is the eldest prince's birth mother. Who would dare touch this one? Saying this, she quickly pushed away the palace maid's hand, lifted the hem of her dress, and then ran toward the backyard. Nobody dared to stop her, and nobody knew where she was going. The imperial guards surged into Qinghua Palace with a decree from the cabinet. By decree of the cabinet, we have come to arrest imperial consort Xian, Wang Shi, for aiding the eldest prince in the assassination of His Majesty. The palace maids trembled in fear and pointed toward the backyard. Her Highness, as she ran that way. The imperial guards immediately gave chase and searched the entirety of the backyard. However, they did not see any signs of imperial consort Xian. Where could a noble lady without any martial arts training have hidden? One of the guards saw well in the backyard and found it a bit suspicious. Stepping forward to take a look, he immediately let out a shocked cry. Wang Shi is here. She threw herself into the well. The court officials had not yet dispersed, and the eldest prince's guilt had already been determined. The only important matter left was the enthronement of the new ruler. If it was not the eldest prince, it was the second prince. One was a ruler-killing traitor, while the other was the new ruler. There was absolutely no suspense. Senior Cabinet Minister Chun cupped his hands toward the sky. Now that the truth has come to light, His Majesty will be able to rest in peace. Right now, the most pressing matter is to enthrone the new ruler and carry out His Majesty's funeral. That will keep His Majesty from being kept in Baohua Palace on his own. Everyone turned to look at the second prince. The eldest prince was now in prison, so whether it was seniority, talent, prestige, or hope, none could oppose the second prince. There was absolutely no suspense to this. Gu Shubai suddenly remembered what Yu Fu had said. She said that if not for committing regicide, the eldest prince becoming the new ruler would have been the better choice. The second prince was stupid and ignorant, being swayed by Yin Shuo with just a few words. Would this sort of person be a wise ruler? He furrowed his brow and was dismayed at the scene unfolding at the front of the court. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. While investigating Emperor Ning's assassination, he had worked earnestly and only thought of finding the truth to allow Emperor Ning to rest in peace. But now that he had succeeded, with the eldest prince being imprisoned and the second prince about to be enthroned, he could not feel any joy. He looked at Gu Huaijiang. Gu Huaijiang's face did not show much emotion. He had many years of experience in court and had learned long ago not to show any emotion. Just as the officials were falling over themselves to crown the second prince the new ruler, Gu Huaijiang cupped his hands. For something as important as selecting a new ruler, since ancient times, military officials have not participated in political affairs. This matter shall be left to the cabinet and my lords to decide. This marquis will take these witnesses and find them suitable places to stay. I will be bidding farewell first. Marquis Gu, why are you leaving like this? Senior Cabinet Minister Chun personally stepped forward to have him stay. What is this about military officials not participating in political affairs? Aside from being a military official, Lord Marquis also holds the title of Marquis and is an honorable member of this court. More importantly, if not for Lord Marquis' efforts in the investigation into His Majesty's assassination, we might not have been able to find the truth. Quite a few officials also chimed in. That's right. This case could not have been solved without Lord Marquis. There's no need to refuse. How could something as important as the enthronement of a new ruler be done without Lord Marquis? Gu Huaijiang, however, was very resolute. This Marquis joined in the investigation into His Majesty's assassination was a result of there being no better option. His Majesty treated this Marquis very well, and this Marquis had to return that favor to His Majesty. Now that the situation in court has been cleared up, the cabinet will be able to handle the enthronement of the new ruler. This Marquis will be leaving first. After saying this, he turned and left with Gu Shubai closely following behind him. Both father and son had made great contributions, yet they took a step back at this critical moment. They made it hard for people to try and guess what they were thinking. The corners of Yin Shua's lips curled into a sneer, while the second prince's eyes looked uncertain. Who knew what he was feeling? If the one who had been engaged to Danyang was Gu Shubai, he would surely have been able to keep Gu Huaijiang at this time. After all, his in-laws were the ones he could rely on the most. Unfortunately, Gu Shubai did not marry Danyang. This meant that Marquis Gu's Manor's army would always be a threat to him, especially after he ascended the throne. The only person he could rely on now was his brother-in-law, the prime minister who had provided evidence against the eldest prince at a critical moment and the one who was related to him by marriage. If not for his efforts in working undercover against the eldest prince, how could it have been so easy to get the evidence against him? Senior Cabinet Minister Chun watched Gu Huaijiang and his son depart before returning to the top of the steps and clearing his throat. He was worried about Yin Shuo, but the second prince was the best choice to become the new ruler. This was an unchangeable truth. After much thought, he loudly said, His Majesty did not have many sons. Discarding the patricidal and regicidal eldest prince, the second prince is the eldest prince of the remaining princes, and he is the only son born of the late empress. More importantly, with Marquis Gu personally verifying it, before His Majesty passed away, he previously mentioned appointing the second prince as the crown prince. When it comes to talent and ability, The second prince is the only one qualified to become the new ruler. What do my fellow officials think? The other officials agreed with this. Good. The second prince is both talented and virtuous. It's natural that he should become the new ruler. That's right. The second prince is the one with the noblest background of all the princes. It's natural that this would be the case. We all support the second prince becoming the new ruler. Second prince, please do not refuse and quickly ascend the throne to preside over His Majesty's funeral. The second prince had not heard such complimentary words in a long time. Hearing them now, he felt comfortable and at ease. Inshua stood at his side with that same faint smile as before. Who knew what he was thinking? Gu Huaijiang and Gu Shubai quickly exited the palace. Their footsteps were resolute but also extremely dejected. Bai Buyang and the others followed them at a distance. They seemed to notice something but did not dare speak out of turn. Father, I feel that I still let His Majesty down and let down the citizens of Eastern Ling. Gu Huaijiang suddenly stopped and turned to look at Gu Shubai. Foolish child, this isn't your fault. Even if His Majesty was let down, I, Gu Huaijiang, who let him down. It isn't the fault of the younger generation. Gu Shubai quickly said, No, father. When you stopped Sun in the hall earlier, you were right. Inshua's accusation was very effective. The second prince has already been completely swayed by him. If I had been rash at that time and brought up Inshua's guilt without any evidence, it would not be trusted by anyone. He paused for a moment, but father, with this sort of person winning the second prince's trust and becoming the new ruler's most trusted minister, would they really not cause harm to the innocent? Chapter 345 2 months later, Part 2, 2 months later, the new year arrived. This winter was much colder than last year's winter. As the later emperor's coffin was carried to the imperial mausoleum, the capital was left in a state of mourning. The sight of the most tragic sobs came from the eldest prince's manor. The eldest prince's main consort passed away early, and her spot was never filled. In the manor, only a secondary consort, 2 concubines, and a young imperial child cried for the eldest prince's soul. To say that they were crying for his soul would not be accurate. The eldest prince would be escorted to the entrance of the food market and executed today. It was thanks to intervention from Lord Marquis Gu that none of the women or children of the eldest prince's manor would suffer the same fate. It was just that they were sentenced by the new ruler to be confined to the eldest prince's manor. As people related to the traitor, they would not be allowed to move freely, and they were reduced to being on the same level as servants or slaves. The eldest prince's transport carriage passed by the front of the manor, and a group of women supported each other as they wanted to send him off one last time. Go back, you guilty slaves, who allowed you to move around as you please. The soldiers guarding the entrance were particularly domineering. With a swing of their blade, the consorts immediately moved to protect the young boy. The eldest prince sat in the carriage with a wooden expression. He coldly watched his wives and son get beaten without saying a single word. He knew that these guards had been sent to the eldest prince's manor by Ning Chengyi. As long as he showed the slightest reaction, they would be even happier to beat his family members. Their goal was to make him suffer. He could not move. He could not speak. If he did speak, it would cause them more trouble. The women's desperate cries grated the ears. One of the guards saw that the eldest prince was expressionless and decided to lift the little boy up high. Don't, I beg you to spare the little imperial grandson. The secondary consort and the concubines were loyal and desperately to preserve the eldest prince's bloodline. Crying, they pleaded with the soldier to put the child down. The soldier found their cries to be pleasing. What imperial grandson? Ning Yizhao killed his father and ruler, completely removing himself from the imperial family. Can his son be considered an imperial grandson? He might as well be smashed on the ground and killed. Consort Mother Lu, save me. Consort Mother Lu, save me. The child cried and pleaded, while secondary consort Lu Shi tried to pull the child away. Unfortunately, she was unable to go against the strong soldier, and this caused the surrounding soldiers to laugh. As a secondary consort, Lu Shi was the daughter of a court official. She had never suffered such humiliation before, and her face instantly turned red. The eldest prince looked up at the child in the soldier's hands. The child was still young, and he was pitiful for losing both his mother and father. After he died, it was probable that his child would not be able to keep his life. That Ning Chengji, how could he possibly allow his bloodline to continue? Even when imperial consort Xian had drowned herself in the well, he had to strip her of her title before she died. He ordered that she not be allowed to be buried in the imperial mausoleum. She was not even allowed to have a proper funeral, and her corpse was thrown into a mass grave. Thinking of how the family that he had formed would be broken up after he passed, tears of remorse flowed from the corners of the eldest prince's eyes. The soldier holding the child up high looked at secondary consort Lu Shi and said, "If you kneel and wipe this great one's shoes clean, this great one will let this bastard down." Lu Shi was shocked. Looking at the crying child, her heart stirred. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. This child was the eldest prince's son with consort Zheng, his official wife. Over the years, she had been raising him and thought of him as her own flesh and blood. If she did not kneel, could it be that she would need to watch the eldest prince's only child die? She took a step forward, and just as she was about to kneel, a concubine hastily stepped forward to stop her. "Your Highness must not allow this concubine to take your place." The loyal concubine had not finished speaking before being kicked away by the soldier. "What sort of lowly slut are you? What opportunity do you have to take her place? If it isn't her, it's not worth getting my shoes cleaned." The concubine fell to the ground and coughed up a mouthful of blood. When the soldier was about to kick her a few more times, he suddenly heard a rush of wind, as the wind sent some snow flying through the manor's gates. He was stunned. A yellow carriage with an imperial emblem came along with a procession of well-trained soldiers following behind it. All of them looked very valiant. Though the soldiers did not know which noble this carriage belonged to, they knew that they should step forward and salute, kneeling next to the carriage. The curtain was lifted, and a young maidservant in beautiful clothes stepped out. It was evident just how noble her master must be. Just as he was about to speak, the maidservant stepped on his face, using him as a step to climb out of the carriage. Before His Majesty had been enthroned, he had worked as the personal guard of the second prince's manor. How could he be trampled on like this? Just as the soldier was about to act up, he suddenly saw a beautiful young girl stand up inside the carriage. Wearing a moon-white dress, she made the beautiful red furnishings look plain. Wearing plain clothes, she was showing her filial piety. The girl before him was surely a member of the imperial family. The maidservant reached out a hand and helped her out of the carriage. This time, the soldier obediently allowed himself to be used as a step, allowing her to steadily climb out of the carriage. This subordinate greets Princess Junjiang and pays respects to Princess. There was no need to look at the name on the emblem to know who she was. In the capital, aside from Princess Junjiang, who else could the noblest young girl be? Not even His Majesty's younger sister, Princess Danyang, was this beautiful, nor was she as respected. Yu Fu turned to glance at the soldier and smiled. The soldier was dazed by her smile and just stupidly smiled in reply, but was suddenly given a slap. Chapter 346 The Condition is to Marry You, Part 3. Yao Lan was young, but her slap was not lacking in strength, impudence. "You dare to look directly at the princess." The soldiers from the Gu family's army that were accompanying the carriage rushed forward and pointed their swords at the impudent soldier. The latter wet himself in terror and kneeled for forgiveness. "Princess, spare me. Princess, spare me. This subordinate won't dare to do it again. This subordinate is His Majesty's personal guard. I beg Princess to spare this subordinate's life on His Majesty's account." Yao Lan coldly snorted. "If you're His Majesty's personal guard, you should know just how much His Majesty dotes on our princess, yet you dare to offend her? Breaking the law despite knowing it is even worse." The soldier kowtowed repeatedly in fear, and Yao Lan looked at Yu Fu. The corners of the latter's lips slightly curled up. "You may rise. If you want this princess to not blame you, it's quite easy. This princess is kind-hearted and gentle, and I absolutely despise seeing women and children get bullied. Get up and ask my guards." Would they raise their hands and beat women and children? The soldiers from the Gu family's army loudly replied, "Good men should fight on the battlefield. What skill is shown from bullying women and children?" Their clear response left the others feeling ashamed. The ones who had been referring to themselves as His Majesty's personal guards were instantly left too afraid to speak. Standing before the almost mythical Gu family's army, they felt as if they were not strong enough. The secondary consort, Lu Shi, tightly held the child and blankly looked at Yu Fu. It was only now that she realized that Princess Junjiang had come to support them. It had already been 2 months since the fall of the eldest prince's manor. Even her maiden family, the Lu family, was unable to do anything, as nobody dared to offend the new ruler and help them. Who knew that the one to help them would be Princess Junjiang? The kneeling soldier immediately understood Yu Fu's intention. This subordinate thanks Princess for the teaching. This subordinate will definitely learn well from Princess' personal guards and will never dare to bully women and children ever again. Saying this, he waved behind him. "It's snowing. Quickly bring Her Highnesses and the young imperial grandson in to keep them out of the snow." His subordinates respectfully invited Lu Shi back inside, and the concubines helped support the injured concubine back into the courtyard. Before the gate was closed, Lu Shi glanced at Yu Fu one last time. It was a look of gratitude, and Yu Fu nodded to her to reassure her. She then smiled and said, "You can get up. I have something to say to him. In the end, we are still brother and sister, so I should send him off. Don't you think so too?" The soldier stood up and agreed with everything the beauty said. "Yes, yes, yes, it should be done. Princess, please go ahead. Just don't delay the execution that is to occur at noon." Yao Lan pulled out a pouch of silver and gave a silver ingot to the soldier. Yu Fu nodded. "Don't worry, this place is close to the food market. It definitely won't cause you any trouble." She walked toward the prison carriage. The heavy snow fell on the carriage. Since the carriage did not have a roof, the snow landed directly on the eldest prince. He shuddered involuntarily. Seeing Yu Fu walk over, he was barely able to support his own body but still tried to kowtow to Yu Fu. "Brother Yi Zhao, there has never been a need for such grand gestures before. Can we keep things as they were before?" The eldest prince looked up at Yu Fu in a daze. The year had ended, and the girl was now 14. Coming of age, she had become even more beautiful. With her smiling eyes and charming dimples, anyone who saw her would like her. It was no wonder someone as emotionless as Ning Chengji would like Yu Fu, sending her all manners of precious gifts. His voice was choked up. "Sister Yu Fu, thank you for today. With the state that I have fallen to, nobody dares to intervene, so I will thank you for saving my child's life." Yu Fu removed a jade pendant from her waist. "There's no need for thanks. This is all that I can do. Wasn't the jade pendant that you gave me back then priceless? Let's treat today as me paying you back." The eldest prince smiled bitterly. With her noble status, was there anything that Yu Fu could want but not have? A measly jade trinket from the imperial family was likely nothing to her. This was just an excuse for her to help and allow him to leave with a little less to worry about. When a person was about to die, they became more eloquent. Suddenly, the eldest prince really wanted to say a few words to her. "I killed my father and ruler. Do you not hate me? For me to have fallen to my current situation is fitting for my crime. Did you know? Since the hunting ground, I have often had nightmares. In those nightmares, I saw Father Emperor come to take my life." He looked toward the red gates of the eldest prince's manor and said with a frown, "Today, I will finally be free, but for them, I fear that they will have to endure more hardships." Yu Fu said, "The late emperor treated me very well. Naturally, I did not want to part with him, but I also know that you cannot bear all of the guilt for the assassination of the ruler. Back then, you also treated me very well and treated the people of Marquis Gu's manor very well." "That was fake. I only treated you well to gain the support of Marquis Gu's manor." Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. The eldest prince spoke earnestly from the bottom of his heart. With how wretched he had been, he would rather see Yu Fu leave in disgust than stand here and help him, which was making him feel even more embarrassed. Yu Fu smiled. "Good treatment is good treatment. What does it matter if it was real or fake? I know that you wanted to gain the head general's support, but you truly did take very good care of me. Do you still remember? When Ani wanted to cause me trouble, it was fortunate that you sent someone with a report to relieve me of my crisis. The eldest prince remembered that after that tensions between Yu Fu and Madame Su were eased, and he could not help but laugh. Only you could remember something so trivial. Yu Fu, if there is a next life, I wish to earnestly treat you well. He had never been this honest and certain as he was right now. Yu Fu smiled at him. There will be. In your next life, you and I might be true brother and sister. You can treat me well for my entire life, all right? The eldest prince wiped away the tears under his eyes and looked at the soldiers standing guard nearby. Following this, he moved closer to Yu Fu. He was almost pressing his entire face against the prisoner transport carriage as he lowered his voice. Yu Fu, I don't know if someone who is as vile as me will have another life. If there is, I will definitely take very good care of you. But right now, I have something more important to tell you. Yu Fu also leaned closer, allowing the eldest prince to speak a little easier. What is it? Ning Qingji, that idiot, has absolute faith in Inshua. The other members of court also have faith in Inshua, but you absolutely must understand that Inshua is not a good person. He used my attempted poisoning of Father Emperor to threaten me. With that, I had no choice but to go through with it. If I did not do it, he would have revealed it, and I would have been in the exact same situation. After the eldest prince finished speaking, he saw that Yu Fu did not look particularly surprised. Don't worry, we already know about this. Unfortunately, none of the evidence pointed at Inshua. We already knew about the poisoning from the very beginning. We were the ones who asked Master to pretend not to care about the political situation to hide it. The eldest prince smiled bitterly and said, You already knew. You already knew yet did not tell Father Emperor. It turns out that Ning Chengji isn't the only stupid one. I'm also very stupid. I actually believed in Shua's incitement and feared that you would tell Father Emperor about it. Father Emperor, I'm sorry. He was practically shouting toward the sky. The surrounding soldiers looked at him and watched the eldest son of the imperial family in his final moments. Yu Fu looked around and said to him, If you have anything else to say it now. I can only send you off up to here. You need to walk the rest of the way on your own. The eldest prince slowly fell silent. There's nothing else. Just be careful of Inshua. All of us have fallen for his scheme and have all been under his control. At first, I thought that he was turning on me when the facts of the case were starting to come to light, but thinking on it now, all of this seems to have been his plan from the very start. Yu Fu furrowed her brow. You mean to say that he always intended for the second prince to ascend the throne but deliberately pretended to help you? The eldest prince sneered. Aside from this, I can't think of any other explanation. Think about it. Inshua is someone capable of marrying Danyang for the sake of power. How could he possibly treat Danyang well and not want to get revenge after she humiliated him? This is not at all like Inshua. He knew that once I ascended the throne, I would not have tolerated him. Only that idiot, Ning Chengji, would think that being connected by marriage would placate Inshua. Sooner or later, Eastern Ling will fall to ruin at Inshua's hands. Yu Fu let out a long sigh. All right, I will tell the head general and eldest brother about what you said. Brother Zhao, may we meet again in the next life. The prison transport carriage left 2 deep tracks in the snow. Without anyone noticing, a thick layer of snow had accumulated. Yu Fu stood in front of the eldest prince's manor and watched the eldest prince's carriage depart. Yao Lan supported her from the side and quietly said, Young miss, why bother speaking nicely to those rude guards? You are a princess. Wouldn't it be fine to just order them to treat the members of the eldest prince's manor well? Yu Fu did not look at her. It's up to the owner to punish their dogs. Right now, that person would be the second prince. How could I possibly act so domineering? I also want to teach them a lesson, but teaching them a lesson would be bad for the eldest prince's family. You also saw how affectionate those women were, and that child was innocent. If the soldiers were punished, those women would be the ones to suffer from them, venting their frustration. Yao Lan draped a white fox fur cloak on her, and Yu Fu let out a sigh. His Majesty favors and trusts Prime Minister Yin. It's highly likely that he will discard the cabinet and rely entirely on the Prime Minister. Marquis Gu's manor does not occupy as high of a position with His Majesty as it did with the late Emperor. We cannot be willful and cause trouble for Head General. Yes, I will remember this. It's fortunate that the soldier was only given a slap earlier. Just as master and servant were about to return to their carriage, they suddenly heard the eldest prince shout at the top of his lungs from the distance, "You must be wary of him. His condition for working with me was to marry you. You must be careful." Yu Fu was stunned, her raised foot freezing in midair. Chapter 347. Why not finish what you were saying? Part 1. Returning to Marquis Gu's manor, a group of palace servants was gathered outside. They were all carrying gifts into the manor. Seeing Yu Fu return, Eunuch Qi came over to greet her and pay his respects. This servant pays respects to Princess Junjiang. Where did Princess go on a snowy day like today? Eunuch Qi was previously a member of the second prince's manor. Now that the second prince was the emperor, he became the new head of palace staff. As for the previous head of palace staff, Eunuch Gao, because he had testified in court that the late emperor had intended to appoint the second prince as crown prince, he had also been rewarded, with large quantities of gold, silver, and silks being sent to his hometown. Yu Fu still preferred Eunuch Gao. The two eunuchs both treated Yu Fu very kindly, but Eunuch Gao did not toady up to her like this eunuch. She just found this to be distasteful. It did not matter how much she disliked him. Yu Fu understood that the subject would be like their ruler. "So it was Eunuch Qi, did you come to deliver New Year's gifts on His Majesty's behalf?" "I didn't go anywhere in particular. I just went out for a stroll." Yu Fu summoned some energy to deal with him, and Eunuch Qi smiled and said, "Princess has guessed wrong. This servant did not come to deliver New Year's gifts on His Majesty's behalf, but to deliver gifts to the princess. His Majesty said that the princess is so beautiful that only the best accessories in the world suit her. That's why all of the best accessories from the tributes sent by the small islands and countries nearby were delivered to the princess." Yu Fu looked at what the palace servants were carrying. Each and every item was some sort of accessory. When piled together, they would form a small hill. She forced a smile and said, "His Majesty orders gifts to be delivered to me every few days. In the end, I am not His Majesty's true sister. How could I dare to act like I am? His Majesty should pay a little more attention to Princess Danyang. She is His Majesty's true younger sister." Eunuch Qi suddenly smiled. His shrill laughter made Yu Fu's head hurt. He covered his mouth with a handkerchief. "What is Princess talking about?" Princess was personally conferred the title of princess by the late emperor. Who would dare to say that you are not his true younger sister? If you were his true younger sister, His Majesty would not dote on you this much. Eunuch Qi quietly examined Yu Fu. Seeing her dressed in plain clothes with a white fox fur cloak, she looked like a deity who had descended. It was no wonder His Majesty could not stop thinking and talking about her. In truth, His Majesty also worries about Princess Danyang. It's just that Princess Danyang does not like going into the palace, and even if this servant was to go and deliver her gifts, she would not come and see this servant. It's because of this that His Majesty gradually lost interest and just started giving gifts directly to Prime Minister Yin. That's not all. After this servant finishes delivering the gifts to Princess, I will need to go and deliver New Year's gifts to the Prime Minister's manor. Yu Fu complained to herself. Whether it was Princess Danyang who did not want to go into the palace, or was it Yin Shuo who did not allow her to go into the palace, Ning Chengji had never actually questioned it. He actually trusted Yin Shuo to such a degree. New Year's gift? Yu Fu was a little surprised. That's right. It's already the 15th of the 12th month. His Majesty has always given New Year's gifts to the esteemed officials early. This is a tradition that has been kept from the late emperor's rule. In previous years, Marquis Gu's manor would receive their New Year's gifts the earliest. She subconsciously looked toward the plaque next to the gate. No matter how prestigious Marquis Gu's manor might be, in the end, it was part of the previous regime, and it was now shrouded in a haze. The current ruler favored the Prime Minister's manor the most, and not Marquis Gu's manor. Eunuch Qi seemed to pick up on Yu Fu's feelings. After looking around, he lowered his voice. "Your Highness, there's no need to be sad. The New Year's gift to Marquis Gu's manor this year is a little late, but the gifts to Princess have never been delayed. Marquis Gu's manor is Marquis Gu's manor, while Princess, you are a princess. You two are unrelated, so it won't get in the way of His Majesty's favor for you. Unrelated. How could they be unrelated? Yu Fu faintly smiled. Eunuch Qi, please bring my thanks back to His Majesty. When it comes time for the New Year's banquet, Yu Fu will personally thank His Majesty for his generosity. Eunuch Qi reminded her, Your Highness, forgive this servant for my indiscretion and speaking out of turn, but it has been 2 months since His Majesty's enthronement, yet the position of Empress remains vacant. All of the officials have turned a blind eye to it. You should understand best what His Majesty is waiting for. He looked up at the beautiful girl before him. Amidst the falling snow, her clear skin was even paler than the snow itself. None could blame His Majesty for yearning for such a beautiful person, even leaving the position of Empress open for her. Yu Fu was stunned. The eldest prince's words about Inshua wanting to marry her were still ringing in her mind, and now Eunuch Qi had come to her with this information. She was not stupid. She could understand what Eunuch Qi meant. It was just that she was not thinking about that at all. Eunuch Qi, it's snowing heavily outside. I am truly exhausted and will be going in to rest first. Please do as you wish. Eunuch Qi seemed to want to say something else, but Yu Fu had already turned around and started walking toward the manor. He had no choice but to let out a sigh, as a nearby palace servant vaguely heard him mutter something about a national beauty. The western wing was currently buried under the pile of gifts sent by His Majesty. Yu Fu was a little resistant to this and walked over to the main hall. Gu Huaijiang, Gu Shubai, and Gu Wenqing were sitting and drinking tea. Yu Fu entered the room and removed her cloak. It's rare for head general to have not gone out. Even eldest brother is sitting here idly. Gu Shubai smiled and said, Father returned part of his troops to His Majesty and is now very relaxed. This year, our family will finally be able to celebrate the new year together. Gu Wenqing also smiled. That's right. If it was like in previous years, Father wouldn't even be able to rest during the new year. Returning a portion of the troops is also fine. Last year, half of the manor's members were in Changzhou. This year, the family will be able to celebrate together. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. They spoke relaxedly, but Yu Fu could hear the bitterness in their words. Gu Huaijiang had served on the battlefield for decades, and he had never neglected his duties because of his exhaustion. There was only one possible explanation for him acting like this. That would be to avoid the suspicions of the one in power. It was the case with the previous ruler, and it was also the case with Ning Chengji. The difference was that the previous ruler did not allow Gu Huaijiang to resign even if he was suspicious. However, Ning Chengji was very happy to agree. Yu Fu thought back to what Eunuch Qi had said and started feeling more and more unhappy. Forcing a smile, she said, That's right. This is also good. This year, we will finally be able to celebrate with the entire family. Gu Huaijiang said, I heard from the servants that you went to the eldest prince's manor? The sign at the eldest prince's manor had been removed 2 months earlier. The so-called eldest prince's manor was now just a manor of criminals. Every person living there could be bullied. The eldest prince's title had also been stripped. Nobody in court dared to mention him, and he would only occasionally be brought up in private conversations. Yu Fu nodded. With my status, it's better that I go than if my elder brothers went. First, it's to show consideration for past interactions, and second, it was related to Inshua. She looked up at the others and spoke in a stern tone. Inshua knew that the eldest prince poisoned the late emperor, and he used that to threaten the eldest prince into assassinating the late emperor. Inshua is the one who instigated the whole thing. Our speculation was correct. Gu Shubai said, A dying man's last words are often true. The eldest prince has no reason to try and lie to us. Inshua is a truly sinister person. With how much His Majesty favors and trusts him, I fear that our Marquis Gu's manor. Gu Huaijiang let out a sigh and said, There have been signs of Inshua opposing Marquis Gu's manor since long ago. Now that he has taken away all of the cabinet's power, he wields even more influence and power than with the late emperor. This is the reason for me relinquishing part of my power. We can oppose Inshua without giving an inch, but we can't do the same with His Majesty. As the saying went, if a ruler wanted a subject to die, that subject had no choice but to die. He was not that blindly loyal, but if the ruler wanted to take away his power, he would happily comply. Power was never something that he wanted. Trading it for some peace of mind was worth it. Gu Wenqing said, "Father, blindly making concessions is not the best way of doing things." Despite clearly knowing that Inshua is the one who planned the late emperor's assassination, do we have to allow him to act as he pleases in court? Gu Shubai glanced at him and motioned for him to stop talking about this topic. If there was a way of revealing Inshua's true character, they would have used it, but after 2 full months of looking for evidence of Inshua's participation, they could not find anything. He had acted too quickly, targeting the time when they would be fighting at the border with Western Kuan to carry out the plan, then erasing all of the evidence while they were rushing back to the capital. All of the blame was placed on the eldest prince, while Inshua kept himself completely clean. He changed the topic. "Yufu, what was the cause of the commotion outside just now? Did the palace send another gift?" Yufu slightly nodded with an absent-minded look. Yao Lan waited on her from next to the door and suddenly poked her head in. "Young miss, why didn't you tell them everything?" Right before leaving, the eldest prince said something important. "Why didn't you tell Lord Marquis and the others?" Yufu did not have a chance to stop her when Gu Shubai said, "What important thing did he say?" Yao Lan ignored Yufu's gestures. "Young miss, don't try to stop me. This matter is too important. Everyone must be told." The eldest prince said that Prime Minister Yin's condition for working with the eldest prince was to marry the young miss. Chapter 348 should return to the Prime Minister's manor, Part 2. It's about to be the new year. "Young miss, do you really plan on not returning to the Prime Minister's manor?" Pear was standing at the dressing table and putting away the makeup supplies. It was the end of the year, so it was important to be dressed a little more beautifully. All of the exquisite and valuable accessories were brought out to match the clothing. Injiao sat at the foot of her bed and worked on an embroidery. After hearing this question, she put down her needle. "That's right. It's about to be the new year. It's not quite right to celebrate the new year in someone else's home. I don't know if they will allow me to continue staying in Marquis Gu's manor." Pear was stunned. "Young miss, you're only worried about if Lord Marquis Gu and the others will ask you to leave, but you should also think about our own manor. After all, you are a young miss of the Prime Minister's manor. It wouldn't be right to not go back to celebrate the new year, right?" Injiao looked at her with a frown. "Have you forgotten about how we desperately fled from that place? So what if I am a young miss of the Prime Minister's manor, who truly treats me like one?" She felt the gauze on her forehead. The scar underneath was faintly visible, but it was already much better than when it was completely dark. Unfortunately, despite Yufu trying all sorts of ideas, she could only treat her wound to this degree. It was impossible to restore her skin to how it was before. Every time that Pear saw the scar on Injiao's face, she felt responsible. Though that is the case, this servant heard that His Majesty has allowed the former master to return to the manor to celebrate the new year. With the former master here, eldest young sir won't dare to do anything to young miss. Father will be coming back to celebrate the new year? Injiao was extremely shocked. Back then, her father had been exiled for the crime of attempting to have the heir to Marquis Gu's manor assassinated. Put politely, he was allowed to retire and return to his family home, but the people in court knew the truth. Now that a new ruler had ascended, he was allowed to return. It seemed that the rumors were indeed true. His Majesty's trust in the Prime Minister's manor surpassed his trust in Marquis Gu's manor. She hastily asked Pear, "Will he return for the new year then leave? Or will he be staying in the capital?" Pear smiled and said, "Naturally, he will be staying in the capital. If he was only returning for the new year, how could this servant dare to have young miss go back?" She thought that news of Yin Yin returning to the capital would surely make Injiao rejoice. Who knew that she would frown even more? Father committed such a grave crime. The late emperor's treatment was already merciful enough. For His Majesty to do this now, It must be because of eldest brother's actions for his majesty. To the people of Marquis Gu's manor, how much must this hurt? Payer said. Young Miss has lived in Marquis Gu's manor for 2 months and has begun speaking up for the people of the manor. Although the people of Marquis Gu's manor have treated us extremely well, young Miss is, in the end, a member of the Prime Minister's manor. Payer was afraid that she would not understand and desperately said, no matter how much young Miss hates the eldest young sir and likes Marquis Gu's manor, young Miss should understand. If you don't return to the Prime Minister's manor, there will be no way for you to officially marry the second young sir. With how high of a standing the second young sir occupies, how could he possibly marry a girl with no family background? Ever since Yin Jiao's face was injured, she did not dare consider marrying Gu Jiugu. All right, what is this about getting married or not? Not to mention me being a young miss of the Prime Minister's manor, but even if I was a princess, the second young sir might not want to marry me. Though she said this, she could not help but admit that there was some logic to what Payer had said. She had been living in Marquis Gu's manor this entire time, but who would care for her in the future? She was living here in a dubious manner. After the new ruler ascended, Ku and Yu Yang returned to her own manor. It was now time for her to consider leaving. As for whether or not she would leave and how she would leave, she would need to talk about it with Gu Jiugu. Yin Jiyao suddenly stood up, straightened out her bangs, and applied another layer of red lipstick. Payer said, Young miss, where are you going? Yin Jiyao tidied herself up while saying, I'm going to look for the second young sir. There's no need for you to come. I will go by myself. Payer knew that she did not want to be disturbed by anyone when speaking with Gu Jiugu. She just brought out a cloak and draped it on her. Young miss, take your time. It's hard to walk in the snow. This servant will pack a hand warmer for you. After carefully taking care of her appearance, Yin Jiyao allowed Payer to put the cloak on her. With a smile, she walked out. She just wanted to ask Gu Jiugu one question. Did he want her to leave or not? Arriving outside Gu Jiugu's courtyard, she saw that the door to the room was closed. A male servant was sweeping away the snow in the courtyard and saw Yin Jiyao. Young Miss Yin, have you come to look for the second young sir? Yin Jiyao smiled and recognized that it was Zhong Xia from Gu Jiugu's courtyard. That's right. Is he not in? Zhong Xia smiled and said, Our second young sir has gone drinking with third young sir. It was the third young sir who forcibly dragged him out. In the past, third young sir always said that second young sir drinking all of the time was bad, but this time, he was the one who insisted on going. You didn't see that scene, but it made me laugh so hard that my belly hurt. Yin Jiyao could not help but laugh, covering her mouth. Then where have they gone? I have something that I wish to talk to the second young sir about. Zhong Xia leaned on the broom and pointed toward the garden. If they aren't next to the rockery in the garden, they will be at the pavilion. How about I have someone find them for young Miss Yin? No need. I will go myself. Yin Jiyao thanked him with a smile and then headed in the direction that he had pointed. Zhong Xia watched her parting figure with a foolish smile. He thought to himself that this young Miss Yin was about to become the second wife of the manor. She had been living in the manor for 2 months. Who knew when the marriage would happen? It was a pity that there was a scar on her face. Thinking about her former appearance. Chapter 349, Carry Out an Important Task. Part 3, Following the rocky path to the backyard. The garden looked very desolate during winter. Fortunately, after a day of snow, the barren branches were covered in snow. It ended up looking quite pretty under a layer of silver. A cold wind blew, and everything was covered in a layer of white. Someone spoke in a loud voice. That brazen Inshua. He actually wants to marry Yu Fu? Does he not know that the late emperor personally sanctioned the engagement between Yu Fu and eldest brother? It was Gu Jiugu's voice. Yin Jiyao hid behind the rockery, as the wind carried the conversation past the rockery and into her ears. The two people on the other side, however, did not notice her presence. Gu Hanamo helped him into the pavilion. Second brother, don't rush to get upset. Inshua even dares to bully Princess Danyang. So what is there that he doesn't dare to do? I heard that Princess Danyang was severely ill and cannot even attend the New Year's banquet. Yin Jiyao covered her mouth. She did not think that in a mere 2 months, Princess Danyang's illness would get so much worse. Although she did not like Princess Danyang's domineering personality, she had also been treated well by her. She was the one who had brought in the imperial physician to treat her wound, and, more importantly, she was still her eldest sister-in-law. In Jiao felt a little saddened. Gu Jiugu said, "It was actually like that? Just what sort of mind-altering concoction is he feeding His Majesty? He is the mastermind behind a plan to kill his ruler, yet His Majesty has absolute faith in him? It's a pity that the eldest prince is on his own on the road to the underworld. He should go and keep the eldest prince company." When Yin Jiyao heard this, she was not particularly shocked. Gu Jiugu and the others had never talked to her about this matter, but she was not stupid. She could guess how they felt based on their expressions and tones. It was not just because of them. Rather, it was because she understood Yin Shuo. This eldest brother of hers, who had always been cold and unfeeling, had been sought out by the eldest prince, so how could he possibly have gone undercover to look for evidence for the second prince? This was not his style. Gu Hanamo let out a sigh. Did second brother think that I didn't think about it? Father has given up control of many military matters. This is the same as giving up a portion of our military power. But His Majesty still does not think that it was enough, and Marquis Gu's manor is no longer treated as warmly as before. I heard Steward Qi talk about this one topic, but I don't know if it's true or not. What topic? He said that Eunuch Qi hinted to Father that Yu Fu might be married into the palace to become empress, but Father refused to agree. The wine jug was heavily placed on the table. Since the matter was related to Yu Fu, Gu Jiugu immediately became infuriated. It must have been spurred on by Yin Shuo. That Yin Shuo, I can't forgive him. Gu Hanamo rushed to calm him down. Second brother, this matter hasn't yet been decided. Father does not plan to tell Yu Fu for fear of disturbing her. You absolutely must not speak about it, and even more importantly, you must not be rash. Gu Jiugu had drank too much wine, and his mind was a bit hazy. Being consoled by Gu Hanamo, he slowly calmed down. He suddenly remembered something. Third brother, if we can't find any clues of Yin Shuo's participation in the assassination of the late emperor, can we do anything from Jiao's angle? Yin Jiao heard her name mentioned and became a little nervous. Gu Hanamo said, "Elder brother is talking about young Miss Yin's background? Once word of young Miss Yin's birth mother being a female general from Western Kuan is made public, Yin Yin won't be able to escape being found guilty, and it might implicate Yin Shuo. But won't the innocent young Miss Yin also get hurt?" Crack. It sounded like a branch snapping in the snow, and it came from behind the rockery. Gu Hanamo immediately became alert. Who's there? A girl walked out from behind the rockery, wearing a rose-colored fox fur cloak. Her head hung low with a white gauze covering her forehead. Gu Hanamo thought to himself that things were bad. The girl raised her head. Sure enough, it was Yin Jiyao. Gu Jiugu had also mostly sobered up. "Jiyao? Why? Why have you come here?" Yin Jiyao lifted the hem of her dress and walked forward. Her usually gentle and graceful movements were now very firm. It was as if she had made an incredibly important decision. She walked to the pavilion and looked at the two. "What female general from Western Kuan? You said that my birth mother is a female general from Western Kuan? Father said that she was a common woman from a brothel. How could that identity have changed to a general from Western Kuan?" Gu Hanamo furrowed his brow. Initially, he had wanted to drink with Gu Jiugu because he was feeling annoyed from hearing about Yin Shuo wanting to marry Yu Fu. Who knew that they would be overheard by Yin Jiyao? Now, things were even more complicated. He glanced at Gu Jiugu. This matter should be told to young Miss Yin by second brother. I will be leaving first. Farewell. Come back. Gu Jiugu reached out, but only managed to grab a corner of his robe. He actually used Qinggong to flee. The two sat across from each other in the pavilion. One desperately tried to conceal the matter, while the other was in tears but was resolute. Taking advantage of his tipsiness, Gu Jiugu decided to stop worrying about this matter. All right, I will tell you. But you absolutely cannot tell anyone, especially your father and brother. Do you understand? Yin Jiao nodded. Don't worry. I absolutely won't do anything that would cause harm to Marquis Gu's manor. She wore a serious expression, while Gu Jiugu tipsily squinted at her. Reaching out, he patted her head. There's no need to be nervous. Your mother was a very strong and courageous woman. You should be happy. At dinner the next day, In Jiao suddenly went to say goodbye to Yu Fu. Yu Fu was a little surprised. You're returning to the Prime Minister's manor? Did the manor's servants not do a thorough enough job of taking care of you? In Jiao repeatedly shook her head. That's not it. The servants in Marquis Gu's manor are well trained and have taken very good care of me. It's just that it's about to be the end of the year, and it wouldn't do for me to stay at Marquis Gu's manor forever, thus I was thinking of going back. She had stayed in Marquis Gu's manor for 2 months, and Yu Fu had done her best to treat her scar. She was full of gratitude toward Yu Fu, and the two had become good friends. Yu Fu decided to just be blunt. Are you not afraid of your eldest brother hurting you after you return to the Prime Minister's manor? In Jiao laughed. Don't worry. My father returned today. With him here, eldest brother won't dare to do anything rash. Your father? In Jiao did not miss the look of disappointment flashing through her eyes. She suddenly kneeled in front of Yu Fu, and the latter quickly had Yao Lan help her up. Jiao, what are you doing? In Jiao said, I know that my father committed a grave crime and nearly took the eldest young sir's life. I also know that my eldest brother has tried to oppose Marquis Gu's manor in court many times, which forced Lord Marquis Gu to hand over a portion of his military strength. My own family has let down Marquis Gu's manor, and I apologize on behalf of my father and brother. Yu Fu said, quickly get up. They are them, and you are you. You have a kind heart, and those things have nothing to do with you. A kind heart? Princess, I am unworthy of such a compliment. In Jiao smiled sarcastically. Did you know that I wasn't completely oblivious to the underhanded methods that my father and brother employed in court? Just like this time, when eldest brother plotted the assassination of the late emperor. The truth is that I knew about it. Yu Fu was stunned, but she continued. I was even their accomplice, as I helped them by playing the role of a honey trap. Did you know that when I first met the second young sir, it was an assignment from my father and brother? Yu Fu looked at her without speaking. This time, In Jiao was the one who was stunned. You knew? You all knew? Yu Fu did not plan to continue discussing this matter. She just held In Jiao's hand. All right, that's all in the past. There's no need to bring it up again. After those things happened, you have treated people with sincerity, so there won't be anyone who can use those things against you. Do you understand? In Jiao said, but I can tell that you're very disappointed and feel very sad. The one responsible for murdering the ruler is held in high regard in court, while a loyal family like Marquis Gu's manor is being suppressed. What sort of morality is this? As someone from the Yin family, not even I can bear to witness it. How can you possibly accept it? Regardless of whether or not I can, Head General won't oppose any of His Majesty's decisions. It's as you say. Marquis Gu's manor is loyal, and Head General is a loyal subject. He would rather relinquish control of the troops under his command if that meant remaining loyal to His Majesty. As Yu Fu spoke, she suddenly remembered what Eunuch Qi had mentioned when he had come to deliver the gifts, and her heart turned cold. In Jiao seemed to understand what she was talking about. Then if His Majesty insisted on having you become Empress, would Lord Marquis Gu still refuse to oppose him? Yu Fu suddenly turned toward her. How did you know about this? In Jiao frowned. Recently, everyone in court knows about it. His Majesty previously brought this up with Lord Marquis Gu, but Lord Marquis Gu did not agree. Second young sir and the others thought that you were naturally less sensitive to romantic matters and did not know about His Majesty's feelings toward you. That's why they have been hiding it from you this entire time. But based on what I've seen, you clearly know. Yu Fu smiled wryly. Eunuch Qi also implied it to me, but I put it off. In Jiao said, you can put it off for some time, but you can't ignore it forever. A starving camel is still larger than a horse. No matter how much His Majesty tries to suppress Marquis Gu's manor, it will not collapse, but His Majesty will eventually run out of patience. My eldest brother will also refuse to just wait around. This is the reason that I must return to the Prime Minister's manor. You mean to say that you will be returning to the Prime Minister's manor to help keep an eye on In Shua's movements for me? Yao suddenly smiled, revealing her pearly white teeth. It was unlike her usual ladylike demeanor. I heard that my birth mother was a female general. I want to be like her and do something important. Chapter 350 Yin Returns, Part 1. The lengthy poem sounds burdened and lonesome, but when the grand carriage returns to carry out an inspection, the return home in silk clothes is of lesser import, as all riches shall be bequeathed to the ex-wife, bequeathed to the ex-wife. A small blue carriage passed by on the long street, but came to a screeching halt upon hearing this poem recited at a nearby restaurant. A wrinkled hand reached out from the carriage's window and tremblingly lifted a corner of the curtain. This revealed an aged face with eyes that were no longer as sharp as before. He slightly lifted his head and saw the words Yushan building on the plaque outside. What is this place? The servant driving the carriage heard his hoarse voice and hurriedly said, Master, this is the best restaurant in the capital. Even His Majesty has visited it and wrote a couplet for it. I heard that it's a business under Princess Junjiang's ownership. They are always bringing in people to perform for the guests, and that voice must have belonged to the singer inside. The elderly man slowly nodded and took his time contemplating the name Princess Junjiang while lowering the curtain. He had only been gone for 1 year, but that adopted girl in Marquis Gu's manor with an unclear background had already become a princess. Just what sort of drastic change had occurred in the capital? The small carriage continued on its way and came to a stop in front of the Prime Minister's manor. The servant at the gate saw the run-down carriage and snorted with contempt. Yet another one has come to curry favor with our Prime Minister's manor. Even the person riding in this sort of carriage dares to come and curry favor with the Prime Minister's manor? Did they not see that even great lords riding in pearl-adorned carriages pulled by 4 horses have been driven away? As he said this, he waved his hand to motion for the small carriage to be chased away. Who knew that the driver of the carriage would be the first to speak? Hey, why haven't you gone to get the eldest young sir and young miss to come and receive master? Have 2 people come and help carry master's luggage. Master, the servant froze. My master, you've returned. Quickly go and help master out. The latter command was directed to the servants. The group that was about to chase them away with fiendish expressions saw his expression change at an incredible speed. They too hastily put on fawning smiles and bowed before moving next to the small carriage. The driver helped Yin out of the carriage, and everyone was shocked by the sight. Master had only gone to the old family home for a year, so how did he age like this? Shua and Yao exited the manor one after the other. Rushing forward, they moved to support Yin. The sight of father and son, who had been separated for a long time, caused tears and snot to flow. Yao was already sobbing. Father, how did you become so thin? Are you cold? She took a hand warmer from Pear and stuffed it into Yan's hands. The latter immediately noticed the white gauze on her head. What happened to your face? Shua felt his heart drop as he thought to himself that this matter could not be hidden from Yin. He could only smile and say, Father, it's cold outside. Let's go in and have a leisurely chat. From the main gate to the main hall, Yin paid close attention to the atmosphere in the manor. There were no changes from when he had left, and the main hall was still clean. It seemed that it was being cleaned from time to time, but he could acutely feel that something had changed. The servants' expressions had changed. They were all full of joy and pride, and they were much more respectful toward the eldest young sir, Shua. Eldest young sir, Lord Liu from the Board of Civil Office has come and requested a meeting. Will you be seeing him or see him? Did you not see that father returned today? I won't be seeing anyone. When a servant came in to report, Shua glanced in his direction, and the servant immediately bowed and retreated from the main hall. Yin noted his assertiveness and felt his heart sink a little, but did not say anything. It was only after sitting down in the head seat with a cup of hot tea in his hand did he say, You are now the Prime Minister. You stand above all but one and are heavily favored by His Majesty. That Lord Liu must have come to curry favor with you, yes? Shua spoke inattentively. When His Majesty sent the New Year's gifts, the Prime Minister's manor was the first to receive the gifts. In the past, These people didn't even think about us. But now that His Majesty favors us, they do their utmost to curry favor with us. Just how should Sun look at them? Yin knew that Shua enjoyed the new ruler's favor, but did not know that he was being favored to such a degree. He said in surprise, "Then what of Marquis Gu's manner?" The corners of Shua's lips slightly curled up. His Majesty only sent New Year's gifts to the princess at Marquis Gu's manor. As for Marquis Gu's manor itself, they will need to wait a little longer. I don't think Marquis Gu's manor has ever been given the cold shoulder to such a degree before. Father, are you happy? Happy? Ah, I'm happy. Yin was thinking about something as he turned to look toward Jiao. What exactly happened to cause the injury to your face? Let father take a look. How did it affect such a large area? He removed the white gauze, and the dark scar beneath it caused him to frown. He immediately looked toward Shua with displeasure. When father left, I told you two that you two must support each other. How could you let your younger sister get this injured? Shua looked toward Jiao. Rather than waiting for her to voice her complaints, it would be better for him to tell Yin first. Sooner or later, this matter would be exposed. Yin might get angry over this, but he would never overreact and have a falling out with him over Jiao. He had faith in this. Just as he was about to speak, Jiao took the opportunity and spoke first. It was a result of my willfulness. Eldest brother told me to do something, but in my carelessness, I hurt my head. Blaming eldest brother, I refused to see an imperial physician. When eldest brother did bring an imperial physician in to treat me, I refused to take the medicine and refused to be treated. That was what caused the scar. Shua froze and pursed his lips but did not speak. This younger sister of his had lived in Marquis Gu's manor for 2 months and suddenly returned yesterday. Upon entering, she said that she knew that father would be returning soon and wanted to bury the hatchet with him. She wanted to act as if the things in the past had not happened. Shua did not know what plan she had up her sleeves, but he could not refuse. If Yin returned and found out that she was not in the Prime Minister's manor, things would be even more disastrous. He initially thought that Jiao would surely complain about him to Yin, but she actually took the initiative to cover up for him. Why was she doing this? Shua never believed in someone being kind just to be kind, even if that person was his own younger sister. He cautiously observed Jiao and suddenly heard Yin say, "Why have I not seen Princess Danyang? When you sent that letter to tell father, father was overjoyed. It's just that there were a few items left behind by your mother that could not be delivered to daughter-in-law in time." Shua smiled and gave a look to the servant at the door. The servant swiftly ran off to invite Princess Danyang. Speaking of, Danyang still has not greeted father as your daughter-in-law. Son will have someone bring her to come and greet father. He had used the word bring and not invite. Yin seemed to notice that something was off, and he could not help but stand up in shock upon seeing Princess Danyang walk in. She was thin and wearing plain clothes. Shu grabbed his hand. "Father, please sit. Danyang is of the younger generation. Morals dictate that she should greet father." Yin furrowed his brow and quietly said, "Morally speaking, this is true, but there's a difference between rulers and subjects. When a princess arrives, it's not like with most other families. You and I are subjects, while she is from the ruling family." Shua smiled and looked down toward Princess Danyang. She stepped forward and bowed to Yin. "Greetings, former Prime Minister." Yin felt the atmosphere was odd. Chapter 351. What exactly is going on? Part 2. After the conversation, Yin and Shua returned to the outer study. Yin then ordered a servant to go and invite an imperial physician to come and treat Jiao, saying that he was worried that if a girl had a scar on her face, she would not be able to get married. He did not know that Jiao's scar could not be treated. She did not expose this matter, only saying that she would accompany Princess Danyang back to the eastern courtyard. While she was on her way, she said for the imperial physician to come and examine Princess Danyang. Shua did not move to stop her. Any imperial physician who came to the Prime Minister's manor would know what illnesses they could treat and what illnesses they could not treat. Yin stepped into the outer study. The light coming through the windows was a little bright. The entire study was bathed in light, making it completely different from the dim room that it had been before. He was stunned. For the first time, he felt that he was no longer the master of the Prime Minister's manor. "You've turned the outer study?" Inshua quickly cupped his hands and said, "I took the initiative to change a number of things and hope that Father will forgive me. Since I am heavily favored by His Majesty and have my status as a husband to the imperial family, the manor receives far more guests than it did before. There are some things that need to be discussed in the outer study, and keeping it as dark as it was in the past would arouse suspicion." Yin nodded, but looked as if he had something on his mind. "That's right. You are the prestige of the current court. You have already surpassed Father." Inshua feared that he would overthink things and quickly said, "No matter how tall a mountain gets, it can never rise as high as the sun. Father is Father. No matter how high Sun climbs, Father will always be the most important person in Sun's heart." This was originally Father's study. If Father does not like the changes, it can be changed back for Father to use. Yin smiled. "There's no need. The brightness is quite nice. In the past, only the two of us came here, so it was fine for it to be a little darker. You're right that now that you are receiving more people now, it should be a little brighter. What would Father do with this study? I no longer have any official matters to work on or any office work. You can use it yourself. At any rate, the main hall has a small study. If Father wishes to read or work on calligraphy, that place will suffice." He spoke earnestly, and Inshua did not continue to press the issue. Yin walked around the study and saw that the desk was covered in a number of texts. He subconsciously reached out to read one but retracted it. These texts were for the Prime Minister, and he was no longer the Prime Minister. Even if they were father and son, it was best if there was a clearer distinction when it came to things pertaining to court affairs and influence. He sat down in an armchair to the side and glanced at Inshua. "The old home is far away, and there are many things that you have written about that Father does not know much about. But Father has yet to become muddled with old age. From the moment that I stepped into the manor to this very moment, all of you have been spouting nothing but lies. Do you think that Father has become old and muddled?" His gaze was sharp, just like when he was dubbed the hawk-eyed Prime Minister in court. Inshua was shocked and quickly stepped forward. "Son doesn't dare. Whatever Father wishes to know, Son will definitely tell Father. Son would not dare to hide anything." "Then why don't you tell me first about what exactly happened with His Majesty's assassination?" Injiao accompanied Princess Danyang back to her room and dismissed all servants aside from Payer and Diener. "Princess, the imperial physician will be here shortly. I will have him examine you. The scar on my forehead can never be treated, and I have accepted that, but your illness cannot be ignored forever." As a girl, though not yet married, Injiao remembered some things that the granny responsible for teaching her taught her. Every time that she thought about this, she felt extremely saddened. She had formed a kinship with Princess Danyang through their shared suffering. They both had to survive under Inshua's cruelty. Princess Danyang smiled. "Stop calling me princess. The emperor in the imperial palace is my elder brother, but he doesn't care at all whether I live or die. He only cares about Inshua, the prime minister who can help him accumulate influence. You and I are both just chess pieces to our families. You clearly know this, yet you call me princess. It just feels like a joke to me." Injiao thought about it for a bit. She hated Inshua a great deal, so she would probably dislike being called eldest sister-in-law. Thus she said, "Then, how about I call you by your given name?" Princess Danyang nodded and said, "As for the matter of having that imperial physician examine me, there's no need to worry about it." "Oh, did you think that Inshu wouldn't know that you would think of having the imperial physician examine me? He wouldn't allow an imperial physician to know about my illness, and even if they did find out, he would allow them to let His Majesty find out. Even all of the imperial physicians have been taken in by eldest brother. That doesn't seem to be the case. He can take in one or two, but there are too many imperial physicians, and there are many officials in court. Someone would eventually tell His Majesty about my condition." The corners of Princess Danyang's lips were curled up, but her eyes were cold and full of despair. "Do you think that His Majesty has truly been deceived and has not saved me because of that? In the end, It's just that he doesn't care about me. In the past, he would think highly of me because I could talk him up in front of Father Emperor. Now that he is the ruler, the only ones he cares about are the officials with power. For example, In Shuo. In Jiao seemed to have an idea, suddenly saying, "But the imperial physicians all want to try to get close with Yu Fu. If I mention Yu Fu's name, they might be willing to earnestly treat your illness." Princess Danyang had not heard that name in such a long time that it actually felt as though she had been isolated in a different world. She lifted her head and blankly looked at In Jiao. "Yu Fu? Oh, sure enough. You lived in Marquis Gu's manor for 2 months and have already gotten familiar enough to call her by her name." Chapter 352 Related to You, Part 3. In Jiao fell silent for a moment. She knew that Princess Danyang and Yu Fu were not on good terms. Back then, the one whom Princess Danyang wanted to marry was Gu Shubai. However, Gu Shubai did not want to marry her. After Yu Fu appeared, she obtained Gu Shubai's love and affection, and this was true of the other members of Marquis Gu's manor. This caused the self-important Princess Danyang to become envious to the point of going mad. Things only started to get better after she married into the Prime Minister's manor. Princess Danyang said, "You wanted to bring an imperial physician in to treat me. I believe this isn't just to repay me for inviting an imperial physician for you, right? The people in Marquis Gu's manor sent you to do it?" "No, no, no, that's not it." In Jiao quickly waved her hands. "The only reason that I was able to leave the Prime Minister's manor is that the third young sir came looking for you. But it wasn't Marquis Gu's manor's people who wanted to let His Majesty know about your situation. It was me." "You?" In Jiao nodded. "Do you find it incredibly hard to believe that I would want to ruin the glorious position that the Prime Minister's manors currently enjoys and want to expose my own eldest brother?" "Expose?" "The exposing that you are talking about, it's not just his harsh treatment of me, is it?" Princess Danyang looked at her with a frown. There was a beautiful resonance between the two girls who shared feelings of sympathy in their dire situations. She seemed to instantly gain an understanding from the look in In Jiao's eyes. She trembled. It was In Shuo who killed Father Emperor?" In Jiao did not answer her, as her gaze landed on her white dress. The Princess Danyang, who usually dressed in flashy colors, was currently wearing plain clothes, giving her a uniquely beautiful appearance. Her body swayed, and she nearly fell to the floor. In Jiao quickly moved to support her. "You absolutely must not reveal it. His Majesty will not believe it, and you will end up being killed." Princess Danyang nodded. She had been by In Shua's side for quite some time, and she knew just how ruthless that man could be. But since she knew about this, she could not just sit around and do nothing. "Jiao, will you be attending the palace's New Year's banquet?" In Jiao slightly furrowed her brow. "In the past, before I was disfigured, they would not allow me to frequently go into the palace." She paused when she said this, then suddenly remembered why In Yin and In Shuo did not allow her to go into the palace. It was because her birth mother was Lu Yin, a female general from Western Kuan. They were worried that if she made an appearance in front of people from outside the family, those outsiders might recognize that she had some of the same facial features as the female general from back then. Even if that female general had passed away over a decade ago, and nearly nobody remembered her appearance, there was still Gu Huaijiang. Before leaving Marquis Gu's manor, Gu Huaijiang himself told her that she looked almost exactly like Lu Yin. It was just that one's brows had a vigorous and valiant appearance, while the other was more emotional and expressive. In that moment, In Jiao no longer wanted to be a weak and useless girl. Princess Danyang reached out and waved her hand in front of her eyes. "What are you thinking about?" "Ah, it's nothing." In Jiao regained her composure. "I was saying that now that I have been disfigured, they're even more unlikely to allow me to go into the palace. But you can go into the palace." "Me?" Princess Danyang was feeling a little uncertain. "In Shu might not allow me to go into the palace. Even if I do go, I am not certain that I will be able to do anything." "What do you want to do?" Princess Danyang smiled. "What I want to do is naturally the same as what you want to do." The resentment for the murder of her father was absolutely irreconcilable. She absolutely could not allow Yin Shuo to go unpunished and wield great power in court. Yin Jiao thought for a bit. Danyang, don't be rash. Let me think about it properly. She slowly walked over to the table and sat down. Princess Danyang also followed her and sat down. She did not feel compelled to rush her. After a long pause, Yin Jiao said, "As His Majesty's younger sister, it would be unreasonable for you to not be allowed to attend the New Year's banquet. This is especially true now that Father has returned. Father is someone who favors tradition, so I am guessing that eldest brother will allow you to attend. As for what you can do after entering the palace, all you can do is tell His Majesty about how eldest brother treats you. You absolutely must not tell him about how his involvement in the assassination of the emperor." Princess Danyang said, "Why can't I tell him? Could it be that it's not true?" Yin Jiao said, "Based on how much His Majesty currently trusts eldest brother, not to mention him not believing you, but even if he did believe you, eldest brother could also explain it to him as having been for the sake of helping His Majesty ascend the throne. Forgive me for speculating on a conspiracy, but if the late emperor did not die, His Majesty would not have become the emperor. Isn't that right?" Princess Danyang's entire body trembled, but did not refute what Yin Jiao had said. She understood that Yin Jiao was right. Both the eldest prince and the second prince worked tirelessly for the throne. In their eyes, the life of the late emperor was worth less than the throne. When the late emperor had been sick and on the verge of death, the second prince was only occupied with the crown prince's position. When had he ever shown concern for the late emperor's condition? She was also a descendant of the deity of medicine, who had saved the late emperor's life. When it came to bloodlines, she still could not compare with Eastern Ling's princesses that were born to concubines. But Ning Chengji had said this, and nobody dared to refute it. They could only agree. That's right. When the late emperor passed away and the capital became chaotic, it was Princess Junjiang who used her own guards to restore the peace. With one person bringing this up, Ning Chengji immediately put down his wine kettle and loudly said, "Who was it that said that?" Everyone immediately waved their hands, expressing that they had not said it. One low-ranked official gritted his teeth and stood up. "Scared witless," he said. "Responding to your Majesty, it was this official who said it." They were too far apart, and Ning Chengji stared at him for a long time. "Who are you?" This official is Shimin Chuang from the government of Linen. "Because of my contributions to quelling the unrest in the capital, your Majesty benevolently allowed me to participate in the banquet." Ning Chengji laughed. "Ha ha ha, so you're Shimin Chuang. We know you. We know you. Didn't we confer you and Imo?" Eunuch Qi quietly reminded him from the side. "Imo Huangsha." "Right, the general from the capital, Imo Huangsha. The two of you aided Princess Junjiang in restoring peace to the capital and suppressing the bandits. We are quite pleased. What you just said was very good. Reward him. Reward him generously." Shimin Chuang hastily dropped to his knees to give thanks. He had nearly been scared to death by Ning Chengji, thinking that this new ruler disliked hearing someone speak highly of Princess Junjiang, who knew that he would be delighted and not furious. To have been rewarded generously for saying this really was a stroke of good fortune. Shimin Chuang kneeled and gave thanks to Ning Chengji and Yu Fu. "Many thanks, Princess." "Many thanks, Princess." Yu Fu sat in the seat reserved for the most revered official and just felt a chill. She looked to the seat across from her. This year, Marquis Gu's Manor's seats had been pushed down quite a bit. Not only were they below Yin Shuo, but they were also below the members of the cabinet and Ji Daogong. Gu Huijiang and Gu Shubai made an appearance. One looked particularly calm, while the other worriedly looked at Yu Fu. Yu Fu dryly laughed and said to Shimin Chuang, "It's all His Majesty's benevolence. It's completely unrelated to me. Lord Shimin, there's no need to be so courteous." Ning Chengji's voice came from above. "Of course, it's related to you." Chapter 353. With the Empress seat as the prize, Yu Fu finally looked up toward the head seat. He was wearing a set of bright yellow dragon-embroidered robes and had a golden crown with 9 sets of beads on his head. He sat on a tall golden throne, and the glamour made it hard to see his expression. He was faintly smiling and looking in her direction. If not for your timely actions, how could Shimin Chuang and Imo Huangsha have managed to quell the chaos in the capital? We wish to reward you, and that is how they conveniently got rewarded. Another person stood up below. It was Imo Huangsha, the other person who was conveniently rewarded. He and Shimin Chuang stood together and gave their thanks to Ning Chengji and to Yu Fu. Yu Fu slightly furrowed her brow, and her eyes became cloudy. Ning Chengji had elevated and praised her in front of military and civil officials, but what was he planning? Seeing that Yu Fu did not speak, he motioned for Shimin Chuang and Imo Huangsha to return to their seats. The fireworks were still being set off outside. Their loud explosions made her feel uneasy. She glanced at the seats across from her, and a number of older officials wore worried expressions. Though she was young, she could understand why they were worried. The sound of strings and woodwinds rose as two groups of performers entered the hall. In the cold of the 12th month, they wore thin and revealing clothes, as the silver bells around their ankles rang with their every move. Your Majesty, Yu Fu opened her mouth, and the sound of the instruments immediately stopped. The two groups of dancers froze in place, not daring to move carelessly. Everyone turned to look at her. Yu Fu suddenly stood up. The 3-month mourning period for the late emperor has not yet ended. Though the new year should be celebrated, it would not be good to celebrate too much. The fireworks, the merrymaking, the music and dancing, the fragrant wine, all of these are useless for mourning the late emperor. Your Majesty, please reconsider. She gave voice to what a number of the older officials were thinking. Senior Cabinet Minister Chen looked at her in shock, but could not help but sigh in admiration. Who knew that this pampered princess would be so understanding? The rumors of her exceptional qualities were well earned. While this was happening, the hall fell completely silent. Nobody dared to do anything before Ning Chengji spoke. It was not as if nobody else had said what Yu Fu had just said. Before the Board of Rites arranged the banquet, Senior Cabinet Minister Chen led a group of cabinet ministers in jointly signing a petition to Ning Chengji to keep the banquet more modest during the mourning period. However, that petition was completely ignored. After that, they heard from a eunuch that Ning Chengji had slammed their petition to the ground. He even said that if the petition had not been jointly signed, he would have sentenced the person to submit the petition to 50 strikes. With such wanton tyranny, the officials were already exhausted from the assassination of the late emperor, and now they were unable to control their new ruler. That was until Yu Fu spoke up, and she had done it in front of both military and civil officials. Ji Daogong looked at Gu Huaijiang, while Gu Huaijiang and Gu Shubai exchanged a glance. They were all worried that Ning Chengji would do something bad to Yu Fu. Ha ha ha. The sound of laughter broke the silence. As Ning Chengji waved his hand, Yu Fu is right. Let's get rid of the performances. Tell the people outside to stop setting off the fireworks. Saying this, he lifted his wine kettle. Suddenly realizing something, he poured the wine out behind himself. Come, swap out the wine in the hall for tea. We shall offer a toast of tea to Princess Junjiang. He did not get angry. Instead, he did as Yu Fu suggested. The way in which the officials looked at Yu Fu instantly changed. Could it really be as the rumors said, and His Majesty truly wanted to take Princess Junjiang as his empress, and that was why he listened to everything that she said? In truth, if there was such a wise empress to assist and guide His Majesty, Eastern Ling's situation in court might be salvageable. Unfortunately, Ji Daogong and Senior Cabinet Minister Chun looked toward Gu Shubai at the same time. At the bottom of their eyes, there was an emotion that was hard to describe. This princess had been engaged to the heir to Marquis Gu's manor, and the two were in love. After His Majesty ascended the throne, he had made many moves to suppress Marquis Gu's manor. If he then took this subject's wife, would it not be criticized by everyone? Senior Cabinet Minister Chun let out a long sigh. He had never felt as much regret over something that he had done as he did today. But even if he regretted it now, if he had allowed the eldest prince to muddle his way to the throne, would the result have been any better than it was now? The officials stared blankly as the cups of wine in front of them were swapped out for tea. Nobody dared to voice any objections. Ning Chengji raised his cup and offered it to Yu Fu, and Yu Fu expressionlessly drank it. Ning Chengji said, "In order to express our condolences to the late emperor, there shall be no performances today. However, there are quite a few young misses from prominent families that have come in today. When the late emperor was still alive, he loved allowing the young misses to perform. For today, let's act as if the late emperor is still here, and let us use that to express our grief for his passing. How does that sound?" A few of the young misses present revealed looks of joy. Initially, they thought that after Yu Fu had spoken, there would be no chance for them to display the talents that they had worked so hard on. They did not think that this could happen. By using the late emperor's love for entertainment and banquets as a reason, it became impossible to object. Ning Chengji then continued, "Since we are expressing our condolences to the late emperor, all of the unmarried young misses that have come today must perform. We will reward you with glory." Saying this, he clapped his hands, and 4 to 5 eunuchs carried a tall seat in. It had the same golden base as the imperial throne, and the only difference was that the base of this throne had a phoenix engraved on it. It was the Empress seat. A discussion broke out among the officials, and looks of desire were visible in the eyes of the young misses. They were eager to put forth their full effort in the upcoming performances. Ning Chengji smiled and said, "It has been 2 months since we were enthroned, yet the Empress seat has remained vacant. While the late emperor was still alive, the late Empress passed away early from illness. Thus it has been decades since the Empress seat has been brought out. Today, we will use this as the reward, and one of the young misses will be allowed to sit in the throne." Once this was said, not to mention the young misses, even the officials became excited. The Empress seat could not be filled so casually. It was related to the country's foundation. The officials with daughters in the hall were filled with expectation, while Ji Daogong and the other senior ministers were filled with apprehension. Gu Shubai looked toward Yu Fu, and the latter looked back at him and nodded. There was a hint of a smile in her bright eyes as she tried to reassure him. Regardless of why Ning Chengji brought out the Empress seat today, she would not want it. "Your Majesty, would this consort be permitted to participate?" A member of the imperial harem below stood up. Yu Fu recognized her. It was one of Ning Chengji's consorts from before he had ascended the throne. After Ning Chengji ascended, the Empress seat remained vacant, and she fully believed that there was some hope. She did not think that he would just confer her the title of Imperial Consortly and just leave things at that. Naturally, Imperial Consortly could not accept this. Ning Chengji glanced at her. "You are an Imperial Consort and not some unmarried young girl. Why are you trying to join in on the excitement?" Imperial Consortly puffed up her cheeks and pouted, but it was all pointless. When she sat down, she angrily looked at Yu Fu. What nonsense about using the Empress seat as a reward, and what nonsense about selecting one of the young misses present to be the Empress. Ning Chengji, he might be able to deceive others, but he could not deceive her. She knew that the only one he wanted to make Empress was Yu Fu. Ning Chengji looked down below. He was not too familiar with the officials' daughters. In previous banquets, things like the order in which the young misses performed were managed by Imperial Consort Xian. Imperial Consort Xian had passed away long ago, and Imperial Consortly was the only member of his inner palace that had some name recognition. The other concubines from the second prince's manor did not have particularly high standings. As a result, he said to Imperial Consortly, "Forget it, we will give you some glory. Come and pick the order in which they shall perform." Imperial Consortly thought quickly and looked down at the various young misses. Suddenly seeing someone whom she had not seen in a long time, she immediately came up with an idea. She pointed at one person. The gems on her golden fingernail protector glimmering. "Let's have young Miss Lu go first." A slender girl stood up from the crowd. Wearing a dazzling dress made of Hangzhou silk embroidered with pomegranate flowers, it was Lu Ruyi, the daughter of Lu Zhan, a senior minister in the Board of Civil Office. Yu Fu found her to look familiar and suddenly remembered that she was the one who had previously been rude to her at another palace banquet. After that, Lu Ruyi had been restricted from entering the palace by the late emperor. How did she get into the palace today? In Shuo, who had been quietly sitting below her, suddenly leaned over. After His Majesty ascended the throne, he granted amnesty to many. As a senior minister of the Board of Civil Office, His Majesty naturally pardoned something like his darling daughter not being allowed to enter the palace. Gu Shubai saw him lean close to Yu Fu, and his brows slightly furrowed. In the end, he managed to calm himself down. Yu Fu's seat was so far away from Marquis Gu's manor seats. It was clear that Ning Qingji did not hope for them to be together. He could not oppose him in public. Fortunately, Yu Fu managed to create some distance between her and Yin Shuo without anyone noticing. Oh, so it was like that, but His Majesty seems to be quite ignorant of these young misses. It looks as if he doesn't recognize any of them. How could he remember to pardon a young miss who could not enter the palace? Prime Minister Yin should be the one responsible for daily matters. You must be the one who reminded His Majesty, right? Yin Shuo was unable to suppress a smile. He felt that Yu Fu's extremely confrontational way of speaking with him was very entertaining. No matter how vicious she was, he could not get angry at her. That's right. As Prime Minister, should I not try to get along with all officials? Whether it was getting along well or winning them over, everyone knew the truth. Yu Fu rolled her eyes at him and did not say anything else. Chapter 354 If You Were Our Empress, Part 2 Lu Rui received the honor and was endlessly thankful. Your Majesty, this girl wishes to perform a dance to celebrate Your Majesty. Ning Qingji politely nodded and sized up Lu Rui. He thought to himself that this girl was so old yet had not yet gotten married. Princess Danyang getting married at the age of 16 was already a little late, but this girl was probably around 17 or 18, right? He quietly complained to himself. Why had Imperial Consort Li chosen this sort of girl to be the first to perform? Eunuch Qi leaned down and whispered something into his ear, and he shot an angry look at Imperial Consort Li. That damn Imperial Consort Li. She clearly knows that we like Yu Fu, yet she deliberately chose someone who is Yu Fu's rival to gain glory. He gnashed his teeth at Eunuch Qi, and the latter reassured him, Your Majesty, calm down. Young Miss Lu did indeed offend the princess, but she could not be said to have opposed her. Look at the princess' expression. When has she ever even thought of this person as a rival? Ning Qingji looked toward Yu Fu and saw her carefree watching Lu Rui's dance. From time to time, she would lower her head to take a sip of tea. There was absolutely no sign of any change in her expression. Only now did he relax. He then motioned for Eunuch Qi to lean over. Imperial Consort Li actually dared to act so brazenly. For the next month, don't let her come to our place. We do not wish to see her. Eunuch Qi bowed and accepted the order. When he raised his head, he glanced at Imperial Consort Li with a look of delight. 1 month earlier, Imperial Consort Li wanted to go to the Imperial study. By saying that she was the highest-ranking member of the Inner Palace, nobody dared to stop her. However, Ning Qingji happened to not want to see her. As a result, Imperial Consort Li cussed out Eunuch Qi today. He finally got revenge. Imperial Consort Li, however, did not notice anything. On the contrary, she was cheerfully watching Lu Rui's dance while occasionally observing Yu Fu's expression. Lu Rui's dance was completely unremarkable. The only point worth noting was that her flowing sleeves moved with vigor. Her sleeves' movements were as sharp as swords, which attracted some applause. Hearing the cheers while she danced in the hall, she could not help but feel a little delighted. Thinking back to the previous mid-autumn banquet and the humiliation that she had suffered there, she wanted to get justice. Thinking like this, she flicked her flowing sleeves directly at Yu Fu. The latter raised her eyes to look at her without any intention of dodging. The sleeves did not reach Yu Fu, as the sound of soldiers pulling out blades came from all around. Countless soldiers moved to protect her. When she raised her head, she saw countless bits of white cloth fluttering in the air. They were from Lu Rui's flowing sleeves. Yin Shuo was the one closest to Yu Fu. Upon realizing that something seemed off, he moved to try and protect her. Gu Shubai was also paying close attention to Yu Fu. Seeing the grim situation, he chose to throw his cup at the flowing sleeves. Who knew that the leader of the Imperial Guards, Meng Fei, who had been standing next to Ning Qingji, would rush forward. He initially intended to cup the sleeves, But because of the cup that had been thrown getting in the way, it was shattered into small pieces. Lu Rui stupidly stood there. Her flowing sleeves had been cut, and she could no longer continue dancing. The atmosphere became awkward. In Shua retreated to his seat, while Ming Fei returned to Ning Chengji's side. Yu Fu looked up at Lu Rui. She was already in a bad mood tonight. She did not think that Lu Rui would dare to do anything to her after being rude to her back then. Her eyes were utterly merciless. Lu Rui was a little afraid. Remembering that Yu Fu was a princess and no longer a little girl who could be bullied, she looked to Imperial Consortly for help. Imperial Consortly thought for a moment, then slowly stood up. You dare to act so discourteously when given honor and nearly hurt the princess. Before she could speak, Ning Chengyi stood up and slammed the table, giving her a fright. Guards, take Lu Rui out and give her 50 strikes. Lu Rui's knees wobbled, as she immediately dropped to her knees. Your Majesty, spare me. Your Majesty, spare me. This girl did not do it on purpose. Imperial Consortly quickly sat back down while nobody was paying attention and acted as if she had not stood up to speak. Lu Zhen hastily stood up from his seat to try and plead for his daughter. Your Majesty, please be lenient. She definitely did not intend to offend the princess. 50 strikes would kill her. I beg your Majesty to be lenient. Ning Chengji did not even bother looking at Lu Zhen and simply said to Yu Fu, what does Princess think? Yu Fu was unhappy with Lu Rui's actions. However, she knew just how heavy of punishment this was. If Lu Rui was really made to endure that punishment, she really might lose her life. Lu Rui was guilty, but she should not die for that. She stood up and said, forget it. I indeed was not injured. Your Majesty, please spare her. Ning Chengji was very displeased upon hearing this. Though you were not hurt, it is indeed a fact that she acted discourteously when given an honor. Hear our decree. Punish her with a length of white silk. Lu Rui passed out in fear, while Lu Zhen felt completely drained. There was a chance of surviving 50 strikes. However, there was no such possibility. Yu Fu did not think that her pleas would have an adverse effect. All of the officials looked at Ning Chengji with looks of fear and disappointment. How could their ruler be this sort of person? How could he be willing to have one of his subjects' daughters sentenced to death over such a trivial matter? Would this not chill the hearts of all officials? The dazzling banquet hall lost its warmth and became chilly. Amidst the silence, only Lu Zhen's begging and kowtowing could be heard. Thunk, thunk. Yu Fu revealed a difficult expression. Although young Miss Lu acted discourteously when given an honor, it was a result of a disagreement with me. I hope that your Majesty will spare young Miss Lu on my account. Ning Chengji had been waiting for this moment. We also wish to do something on your account. Unfortunately, you are just a princess. If you were our empress, we would surely be reluctant to oppose your wishes. Chapter 355 You Are the Cruel One, Part 3. There was an uproar among the crowd, as Ning Chengji finally spoke his true feelings. Gu Shubai stood up to leave his seat, but was quietly pulled back by Gu Huaijiang. Sit down. He looked at Gu Huaijiang in disbelief. He did not understand what he was feeling when he gave that order, nor did he know what he was feeling when facing His Majesty, who was basically asking for her hand in marriage. Since ancient times, marriage had been decided by the parents and matchmakers. The person present with the greatest right to decide this was Gu Huaijiang. Thus everyone turned to look at him. Just as Gu Huaijiang was about to stand up, he suddenly saw a figure next to him stand up. It was Ji Daogong. It was Ji Daogong, the one who never spoke up for his own selfish desires. He very rarely took the initiative to voice his opinion. The previous time, it had been after the late emperor was assassinated, and he had taken control of the situation. This was just the second time. He ran his fingers through his beard and said with a smile, since today is New Year's Eve, could it be that your Majesty drank too much? The late emperor personally sanctioned the engagement between Princess Junjiang and Marquis Gu's heir. At that time, the deity of medicine was also present. Princess Junjiang is already engaged, so how could she become empress? The corner of Yin Shua's mouth twitched, and he took a sip of tea while feigning ignorance to what was happening around him. Even Ji Daogong had spoken up. Who knew if His Majesty would give him face? Ning Qingji was shocked by Ji Daogong's unusual behavior, but he refused to relent. Already engaged does not mean already married. More importantly, after the late emperor engaged them, they did not exchange gifts. How can they be considered engaged? Your Majesty, with an imperial decree, there is no need to go through the usual customs of exchanging. We don't care. Ning Changyi waved his broad sleeves, and a fierce expression appeared on his face. If we say it doesn't count, it doesn't count. Ji Daogong, are you opposing this decree? Ji Daogong was stunned, and Gu Huizheng immediately stood up. Your Majesty must not be so unreasonable. Lord Ji is a senior official who has served in 3 different courts. Not even the late emperor dared to address him by his given name. How can your Majesty act like this? Ning Qingji coldly snorted and did not give Gu Huizheng any face, based on what Marquis Gu is saying, because we ascended the throne at a young age, and most of the officials in court are our seniors, we must be respectful to all of them? Or do you hope that we will show respect to you like when we were a prince? This subject does not dare. Gu Huizheng cupped his hands and bowed. Ning Qingji did not react, as a contemptuous smile appeared on his face. He refused to accept Gu Huizheng's plea. Nobody in Eastern Ling was capable of standing up against the strongest army. Ning Qingji was the new ruler, and his rule was not yet stable. If he wanted to have the young general of the Gu family's army killed, it would surely cause them to revolt. He could not take this risk. He angrily sat down. Fine. Since that's the case, have Lu Rui dragged out and decapitated. From 50 strikes to white silk to decapitation, Ning Chengji's anger continued to escalate. Unfortunately for the unconscious Lu Rui, she had absorbed all of his anger. How could Yu Fu not know that Lu Rui was suffering because of her and Gu Shubai? Your Majesty, she said, Lu Rui's guilt is not worthy of death. Is your Majesty truly unwilling to forgive her? Ning Chengji's gaze landed squarely on her. We already said it. As long as you are willing to become our empress, we would surely give face to our empress and not kill Lu Rui. Gu Shubai's pupils slightly contracted as he clenched the multicolored gem in his hand. Yu Fu was kind-hearted. Though she was an immortal practitioner of poison, she had the heart of a doctor. She would not be willing to watch an innocent person die on her behalf. To save Lu Rui, she had to become empress. If she did not become empress, Lu Rui would die. Everyone's gaze was focused on Yu Fu, as they waited to see what she would choose. For others, the position of empress was lofty and unattainable, but this was clearly not the case for her. Would she agree to Ning Chengji's condition to save one person's life? Yu Fu suddenly smiled. Her charming dimples were so sweet that they were moving. She stood in the middle of the hall in her plain dress. To her side stood a man more handsome than Pan Yu, yet even that was suppressed by the beauty of her smile. The entire hall was filled with splendor and magnificence, yet only she shone as bright as the moonlight. Her cherry-red lips parted. Then, just let her die. It was such a cruel sentence, yet In Shua nearly spat out his tea from laughing. Ning Chengji shot a displeased glance at him. In Shua wiped the corners of his mouth and smiled apologetically. Lu Zhan, who was kneeling on the ground, looked at Yu Fu in disbelief. With a trembling hand, he pointed at her. Princess, how can you be so cruel? Though my daughter has offended you, this is still a life. You could occupy the supremely noble seat of the Empress and save my daughter's life at the same time. Why would you not take it? Seeing Yu Fu ignore him, he decided to start kowtowing toward Yu Fu. Princess, this subject begs you. This subject is begging you. This subject begs you to save my daughter's life. Thunk, thunk, thunk. The sound reverberated in the hall, and blood spilled forth, dyeing Yu Fu's embroidered shoes red. Meng Fei frowned and was about to move forward to stop him, but Eunuch Qi stopped him. Commander, don't go. His Majesty has not permitted you to go. Meng Fei opened his mouth in shock. He only understood eunuch Qi's intention after a while, and he slowly returned to his original spot. Blood being spilled in the imperial palace on New Year's Eve was an ill omen. The officials frowned, as some began trying to persuade Yu Fu, Princess, just agree to His Majesty's idea. Princess is capable and virtuous, and you have a noble status. Only you are worthy of advising His Majesty. That's right, Princess, just agree with His Majesty. Only with you becoming Empress can we feel at ease. Capable, virtuous, and possessing noble status. All of it was bullshit. Gu Shubai coldly watched from the side. The officials that were pleading with Yu Fu all looked away in shame when he looked at them. Pleading with his fiancée to marry another man in front of him. These officials sure were good. They sure were two-faced. He knew deep down that these people were either trying to curry favor with Ning Chengji or understood Yu Fu's personality and hoped that she would be able to make Ning Chengji a virtuous ruler. Lu Zhen continued to kowtow without any sign of stopping. Yu Fu finally bent down, and everyone held their breaths. Leaning over, she pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve and wiped the blood from her shoe. Lu Zhen raised his head in a daze. Yu Fu faced his bloodied forehead and did not feel any guilt. Lord Lu, you're kowtowing to the wrong person. The one who wants to kill young Miss Lu is His Majesty. How is this related to me? Lu Zhen. But as long as I agree to His Majesty's conditions, young Miss Lu would be spared. Young Miss Lu bullied me back then, so why should I give up on a life of happiness for that sort of person? I have pleaded to His Majesty for her life, and I have done my best. Why should I sacrifice my happiness for her? Lu Zhen. How? How can you be so cruel and not save someone when you can? The cruel one is you, Lord Lu. Yu Fu raised her head and looked at him with contempt from the corner of her eyes. Back when young Miss Lu was sentenced to not be allowed into the palace, I did not see you beg to such a degree. Today, Lord Lu kowtowed to the point of bloodying your forehead. Was it for the sake of saving young Miss Lu's life, or for the sake of currying favor with His Majesty? Chapter 356 Perform a Spectral Show, Part 1. The New Year's Eve banquet dispersed in a somber atmosphere. In the end, Lu Rui was executed. She was still unconscious when the Imperial Guards dragged her out. Who knew if she had woken up when the blade was placed on her neck? If she had not woken up, she could be considered fortunate. Yu Fu sat in the carriage on the trip back to the manor, and her body suddenly started to tremble. Don't be scared. I'm here. Gu Shubai comfortingly sat next to her, and she quietly muttered, I'm not scared. I'm just a little cold. She was clearly afraid, yet she insisted on pretending that she was not afraid. Not to mention Yu Fu, but how many of the officials present in the hall were not afraid? Back when they had chosen the second prince to ascend the throne, who could have known that the one sitting on the golden throne would be so ruthless and arrogant? The New Year's Eve banquet was bloody, and there was a bit of fear in everyone's hearts. However, he did not expose her. He just pulled her into his embrace. It's windy tonight. It won't be cold once we get back to the manor. Does this make it a little better? Yu Fu nestled into his embrace and fiddled with the multicolored gem. Eldest brother, do you think that by giving everyone a multicolored gem, they will be able to triumph anywhere they go? That should be the case. Gu Shubai did not believe in superstitions. More importantly, it was just a stone. If having one would lead to victory, what would the killing carried out by the soldiers on the battlefield be considered? But he could not bring himself to say it directly and just gave a vague answer. Yu Fu placed the gems back into the pouch. The Gu family's army is undefeatable on the battlefield, but will we be able to defend against the winds surrounding the palace? Head General, let us go in. A loud banging came from the gates to Marquis Gu's manor, as the soldiers did their best to stop the people outside. They were feeling very troubled. Chizhou immediately rushed over. What's going on? Only after taking a look did he find out why the soldiers were feeling troubled. The ones who had come were none other than Lao Jin, Yan Huasher, and the other military officers. Why have the officers come? It's the New Year's Eve banquet tonight. What banquet? We already know about what happened in the palace. Steward Qi, quickly bring us to see the head general. Zhou hesitated for a moment before allowing them in trance. Head General has not gone to sleep yet. Officers, please come in. The group rushed forward. Arriving at the main hall, they found the candles illuminated brightly. Gu Huaijiang and a few of the young sirs were sitting in the hall and waiting for the new year to arrive. They were all sitting in silence. Greetings, Head General. After saluting in unison, Lao Jing glanced around the hall but did not see Yu Fu. Oh. Head General, where is young Miss Yu Fu? Everyone looked around. Sure enough, they did not see Yu Fu. For a while, they were a little shocked. Gu Shubai quickly said, "There's no need to feel anxious. Yu Fu heard that you have come, thus she went to the kitchen to order for some food and wine to be prepared. She will be back soon." Lao Jin let out a long sigh. That scared me to death. I thought that she... What did you think? Lao Jin glanced at Yin Huasher, and the latter gritted his teeth and said, "We heard about what happened in the palace. His Majesty is too unreasonable. Young General and Yu Fu's engagement was decided by the late Emperor. How could His Majesty dare to act in this way? Does he have any sense of filial piety as a son or kindness as a ruler?" Lao Jin said, "That's right. Head General, ever since His Majesty ascended the throne, our Gu family's army has been suppressed again and again. Now, Prime Minister Yin wants to extend his reach and make changes to our Gu family's army. What a joke. With Head General's leadership, is there any need for a civil official to make changes?" There was discussion abound, and the discussion only died down when Yu Fu entered the hall. Yao Lan and the others were behind her with the newly cooked dishes and wine, and they placed them on the table in the hall. "Since everyone rushed here in the middle of the night, you must not have been able to eat a good meal. Have some warm wine to warm up." Lao Jin let out a sigh. "In my life, I haven't done anything great. The most meaningful thing that I did, of course, would be bringing young Miss back from the entrance to Immortal's Valley back then. We didn't make a mistake. You were even willing to decline the position of Empress. I, Lao Jin, admire young Miss." He cupped his hands in a salute, and the other officers expressed similar sentiments. This made Yu Fu feel a little embarrassed. Yu Fu supported them. "It isn't anything worthy of admiration. I have never cared about these titles." Yao Lan poured wine while looking toward Yu Fu. She had a noble status. The position of Eastern Ling's empress was a treasure to others, but it was completely worthless to her. Lao Jin did not know about Yu Fu's identity, and his admiration for Yu Fu was absolute, as he continued. "Young Miss doesn't want to be empress and can't bear His Majesty's fascination. Head General, tell us, do you think our idea can work?" "Of course not." Gu Huaijiang looked up at everyone and motioned for them to sit down. When everyone was seated, he said, "There are 200,000 troops in the Gu family army, and His Majesty is already being deceived by traitors, so there is already some jealousy present. If you guys go into the palace, His Majesty will feel that he is being threatened and would just envy us even more. If we can't go into the palace to see His Majesty, what should we do?" Lao Jin scratched his head, and Yin Huasher said, "If Head General has a good idea, please tell us. We will definitely do everything that we can to help. Is our Gu family's army's young madam someone that His Majesty can snatch away just because he wants to?" "Absolutely not." Gu Jiegu said, "Right now, the one I'm worried about is not Yu Fu. It's father. His Majesty did not forcibly hand down a decree to confer that title to Yu Fu tonight because he is still afraid of the might of the Gu family's army. He is afraid of father's influence in court. If His Majesty does not give up on this, his only way forward would be to reduce father's prestige and the strength of the Gu family's army. I fear that His Majesty will make his move against father very shortly." "He would dare." Lao Jin slammed the table and stood up. His eyes opened wide. "If not for our Head General, would he have been able to ascend the throne? He would have died in the imperial family's prison long ago. That ungrateful and despicable person. What qualifications does he have to be emperor?" "Shush, have you gone crazy?" Yin Huasher immediately stood up and covered his mouth. Fortunately, the servants in Marquis Gu's manor were loyal. Even if Zhou and the other servants in the courtyard heard it, they would not spread it. He sternly pointed at Lao Jin. Was that sort of thing also just a joke? If you don't want to be alive, that's fine. But don't implicate head general, the young sirs, and the young miss. You need to remember that regardless of whether or not he has the qualifications, he is already the emperor. He is right, Gu Shubai said. That person in the imperial palace is indeed lacking in qualifications to be emperor. Shubai. Gu Huaijiang spoke in a stern tone and pointed at Gu Shubai. His Majesty has surely been influenced by traitors. This is not in his nature. Don't worry, I will personally go into the palace tomorrow to see His Majesty. I will surely be able to convince him to change his mind. Lao Jin, Yin Huasher, and the others hastily said, Head General, will you be going alone? How can that be? That's right. His Majesty was infuriated tonight. So wouldn't it be bad for Head General if His Majesty was unable to let go of this matter? Gu Shubai did not speak again. In Shua might have influenced Ning Chengji when it came to other things, for example, the suppression of Marquis Gu's manor. But when it came to Yu Fu, this was absolutely impossible. If Ning Chengji had made up his mind, it would be very hard for Gu Huaijiang to persuade him. He suddenly came up with an idea. Have second brother go into the palace tomorrow with father. That would be a good way to take care of him. I will go to the Prime Minister's manor tomorrow. In Shua might have some thoughts on this matter. Everyone in Marquis Gu's manor understood what he meant, and they fell silent for some time. Yu Fu had a bad feeling about this, eldest brother. I will go with you tomorrow. While I'm at it, I can go and see Jiao. Gu Huaijiang felt uncertain. Then we shall go with that. You guys should all go home. For the time being, this matter does not require you guys. Remember not to act rashly. Lao Jin and the others could do nothing but worry. They were unable to do anything in such an important matter, so it was easy to understand just how miserable they felt. But Gu Huaijiang was correct. If they went into the palace to see Ning Chengji, it would only give off a negative impression, and that would only make things worse. The group had no choice but to bid farewell. Right before leaving, Lao Jin specifically pulled Qizhou to the side. If Head General plans something big, you must send someone to tell me. We all want to protect Head General and the others. You are like us. Do you understand? Qizhou gave him a troubled look, but felt that there was nothing wrong with his statement. Officer Jin, don't worry. If something really does happen, I will be sure to send someone to inform you. After everyone left, Marquis Gu's manor returned to being as silent as it had been before, with only the flickering candles illuminating the long halls. Yu Fu blankly watched the lights flicker. Nobody in the hall spoke. Even the usually lively Gu Xiang and Gu Yi were silent. There was absolutely no festive atmosphere. She suddenly stood up with a smile. We can't just sit around all night while waiting for the new year, right? That would be too boring. Fifth brother, sixth brother, how about we perform a mystical show for everyone? Chapter 357 Emperor Xiaozong, Xinyuan Yunqi, Part 2. The so-called mystical show had not been heard of in Eastern Ling before. The first time that they had heard about it was when Yu Fu brought it up. Only after seeing her performance did they come to understand why it was called a spectral show. The show was intriguing and particularly mysterious. Gu Xiang and Gui immediately became interested. Very well, but you only taught us two things. You taught us how to do string figures and how to make handkerchiefs disappear, but eldest brother saw through those long ago. Do you have anything more impressive? I do. Yu Fu led the two outside to talk about it. Seeing the three act so sneakily like little mice, he could not help but smile. Up until a moment ago, the room had been completely silent. Now, everyone had become intrigued as they waited to see Yu Fu's more impressive show. The three quickly returned with Gu Xiang and Gu Yi carrying a large chest. Placing it in the middle of the hall, they opened it up and revealed that it was completely empty. Yu Fu smiled and said, "This technique is particularly amazing. Do you all see this empty chest? Sixth brother will lie down inside, and I will make sixth brother disappear." Gui let out a sigh and walked over to the large chest. He lay down inside the chest, and Gu Xiang lowered the lid. Everyone subconsciously looked at the chest. It was a very normal chest, and it did not look like it had been altered. Could she really make the person inside the chest disappear? Yufu pulled out some red cloth and covered the chest. A little nervously, she gave the chest a kick. Sixth brother, are you doing all right inside the chest? In the past, she had only performed small tricks involving string manipulation. This was her first time making a person disappear from inside a chest, thus she was a little nervous. Gu Wenqing could not help but smile. Covering his mouth, he did his best to suppress his laughter to avoid hurting Yufu's confidence. Gu Yi's muffled voice came from inside the chest. I'm fine. It's just too cramped. Little Yufu, move a little faster. Don't worry. Yufu adjusted the red cloth on top of the chest and glanced at everyone's expressions. They were all watching closely and listening attentively for any movements. To try and pull off any tricks in front of them was truly difficult. Yufu chanted a spell at the red cloth and then removed it. Gu Xiang then opened the lid to the chest. The person inside had disappeared. Gu Wenqing stepped forward and felt around inside the chest. He actually disappeared. How exactly did you do this, and where did Sixth brother go? No matter how he felt around, the chest in front of him was empty. Gu Jiugu was unable to sit still, stepping forward and inspecting the chest. The chest was sealed on all four sides, so it would have been impossible for someone to have escaped under their watchful eyes. Strange. Where did Gui go? It's no wonder it's called a mystical show. It really is mysterious, but where's the mystical element? Yufu said, it's a name from the great Zhou dynasty that existed 200 years ago when the land had not yet been divided in three. It is said that under Empress Shangwan of Renzong's court, it was initially called magic. Emperor Renzong thought that the word magic was a little too terrifying and did not fit a technique that was used to entertain people, thus its name was changed to illusionary show. Who knew that it would become known as a mystical show after being spread around through word of mouth? Emperor Renzong and Empress Shangwan? Gu Shubai stood up and walked around the chest, so it was a technique that originates from the imperial family. Emperor Renzong abdicated at a young age, while Empress Shangwan was a strange woman who was famous the world over. It's just a pity that after the throne was handed down to Emperor Xiaozong, Xinyuan Yunqi, Emperor Xiaozong divided the world in three and gave Eastern Ling and Western Kuan to his younger brothers. Gu Hanemo said, saying it like this, why did mystical shows not continue to exist in Eastern Ling? Strictly speaking, it's because Eastern Ling and Western Kuan did not inherit the Zhou dynasty's will. Gu Huijiang, who had remained silent this entire time, said, after the world was divided in three, there was internal strife in the third generation after the formations of Eastern Ling and Western Kuan that resulted in new rulers. Only Northern Li continues to carry on that lineage with its territory remaining peaceful and without conflict. Then if this is the case, only Northern Li has inherited the will of the Zhou dynasty? But Northern Li's imperial family surname is Ji and not Xinyuan? Gu Huijiang was also uncertain about this point. Northern Li was very closed off from its two southern neighbors. Whether there had been a change of courts or dynasties, he was completely in the dark. With the topic shifting from mystical arts to Northern Li, Yufu hastily said, Head General, are you guys unable to guess where I moved him? The group returned to their senses and started looking around. Only Gu Shubai revealed a bit of a smile. Gu Wenqing said, Eldest brother, have you noticed something? Quickly tell us. Yufu also looked at him, and Gu Shubai face-bombed. I didn't notice anything, but I can also put on a mystical show. I can have Sixth brother reappear inside the chest. Do you guys believe it or not? Saying this, he closed the lid on the chest. Lifting the entire chest, he flipped it over and put it back down, and Gu Yi's desperate cries immediately came from inside the chest. Eldest brother, spare me. Strange, he really brought Gu Yi back. Gu Xiang hastily opened the chest, and Gu Yi staggered out of the chest in a sorry state. Eldest brother, you're too cruel. It was already extremely cramped inside, yet you still flipped me over. I nearly threw up the New Year's Eve meal. Eldest brother, how exactly did you bring Sixth brother back? Gu Wenqing inspected the chest once more. No matter how he looked, he could not find any clues. Could it be that Gu Shubai was truly able to learn Yu Fu's mystical technique just by seeing it once? Yu Fu and Gu Shubai exchanged a look and tacitly smiled. Chapter 358. She is slowly changing. The next day was the first day of the new year. Marquis Gu's manor sent out a request for a visit first thing in the morning, and a response quickly came from the Prime Minister's manor. Gu Shubai and Yu Fu would go to the Prime Minister's manor, while Gu Huaijiang would go into the palace. The two carriages set out together, and then went their separate ways. Gu Huaijiang waited outside the imperial study, and eunuch Qi slowly came out after he had waited for quite some time. Ah, Lord Marquis Gu, it truly is unfortunate. Today is the day that the imperial family has come to see His Majesty. His Majesty is currently speaking with the members of the imperial family inside. Lord Marquis Gu is invited to wait outside. Gu Huaijiang nodded. Very well. This Marquis will wait here. Eunuch Qi examined his expression and then said, If this servant may ask Lord Marquis, what did you come to see His Majesty for? This servant might be able to help with your matter. Without giving it my best effort, who knows if it's impossible or not? Gu Huaijiang glanced at him and revealed a smile. If Eunuch Qi is willing to help this Marquis is naturally delighted. To be completely honest, it is about what happened during the banquet last night. When Eunuch Qi heard that it was about the banquet that had happened last night, he immediately smiled fawningly. Has Lord Marquis finally thought things through? Come on, you blind fools, Lord Marquis is waiting here. Yet you didn't even think of bringing him a chair? The latter half was directed at the palace servants below, and someone immediately rushed forward with an armchair. Gu Huaijiang just looked at it, but did not sit down. Eunuch Qi became more and more respectful. Lord Marquis has finally thought it through. This servant will finally be able to let out a sigh of relief. You have no idea how much His Majesty likes Princess Junjiang. She was offered the position of Empress, yet she refused it in front of him. His Majesty was absolutely furious last night. If he knew that you came here to talk about this today, how could he be in the mood to talk to the other members of the imperial family? Lord Marquis, please sit for now. This servant will go in and inform His Majesty right now. Gu Huaijiang said. Eunuch Qi, please wait a moment. Huh. Eunuch Qi was in the middle of rejoicing and was about to go inside to report to Ning Cheng. Having been stopped, he was stunned. Gu Huaijiang looked at him but did not say a word. The look in his eyes told him that his guess was incorrect. Eunuch Qi was the head of the palace's personnel, and he looked at him in disbelief. Was Lord Marquis Gu, the one who controlled a large number of troops and had enjoyed a period of great popularity, daring to oppose His Majesty? As long as he was willing to relent, he would be the one who stood above all but one. He would be even more important than Prime Minister Yin, who was only a brother-in-law. From that moment on, he would no longer need to fear being suppressed. How could he be so unwilling to relent? Eunuch Qi helplessly looked at him and angrily said, Since Lord Marquis doesn't want to sit, take the chair away. Otherwise, it will cause the members of the imperial family to talk about it. After saying this, he flicked his sleeves and returned to the imperial study. The eunuch below looked at each other, and one approached Gu Huaijiang and quietly said, Lord Marquis, we're truly sorry. As servants, we have no choice but to listen to orders. Gu Huaijiang quietly said, It can't be helped. He knew that he was coming here to anger the emperor, not please him. From the very beginning, he did not plan on being treated with kindness here. Sure enough, after the eunuchs took the chair away, the members of the imperial family New Year's visit continued for a long time. A New Year's greeting would usually last less than an hour, but Gu Huaijiang was left waiting outside for 2 hours without any sign of movement from inside. He did not move an inch and was completely alert, while his expression showed his indifference toward how he was being treated. The eunuchs stood at the end of the hall and mentally gave him a thumbs up. They thought to themselves that someone who had many military accomplishments was truly exceptional. They had an aura of calm certainty to them. After another quarter of an hour passed, the sound of footsteps could faintly be heard coming from inside. as the members of the imperial family started walking out with their own thoughts on their minds. Seeing Gu Huaijiang waiting outside, they came to a sudden realization. It was no wonder His Majesty spoke so much today. It was clear that he did not have much to say, yet he insisted on dragging things out and refusing to let them leave. It turned out that he had done it deliberately to trouble Lord Marquis Gu. A few of the members of the imperial family had awkward expressions, wanting to go and say a few comforting words to Gu Huaijiang, but also fearing that it would be heard or seen by the many people outside of the imperial study. They could do nothing but greet him before leaving. Only the old imperial uncle and Ning Tangshu walked over to him. Lord Marquis Gu. Imperial uncle. The two sides cupped their hands in a greeting, as the imperial uncle said, Lord Marquis Gu came so early. His Majesty is currently in a bad mood. If you have something to say, why not wait until another time to bring it up? Gu Huaijiang was a bit shocked, then said with a smile, Imperial uncle understands my thoughts and knows why I am here. As a result, you know that this matter will need to be addressed sooner or later, and His Majesty's anger will come sooner or later. The imperial uncle sighed, though this old one is a member of the imperial family, and though I am of an older generation, I have no influence. His Majesty respectfully calls me Lord Imperial Uncle, and if he did not respect me, he would at worst call this old one an old fool. As for what happened last night, this old one truly wanted to do something but was powerless. Ning Tangshu frowned and took a step forward to help support him. Eunuch Qi suddenly stepped out from the study. Lord Marquis Gu, His Majesty has summoned you inside. This way. Gu Huaijiang cupped his hands to the two and followed Eunuch Qi into the imperial study. The elderly imperial uncle watched his parting figure and let out a long sigh. Father? Ning Tangshu tried to console him, but the words that were on his lips failed to come out. Thus he simply decided to give up on saying them. He and his father were the same, disliking how Ning Changji was trying to use the Empress seat to steal Yu Fu. They also resented how Gu Huaijiang was being repressed despite his loyalty. However, they were just ordinary members of the imperial family without much influence and could not do anything. Father, let's go home first. Marquis Gu's manor's carriage stopped outside of the Prime Minister's manor. In Shua wore a set of dark red robes and personally waited outside for Yu Fu and Gu Shubai. He seemed to be in a great mood. You two are guests. This is your first time coming to the Prime Minister's manor, but your presence makes my Prime Minister's manor shine. Gu Shubai faintly smiled. For Lord Prime Minister to have come out to receive us, Prime Minister has been too kind. In Shua carefully picked his words and replied, Not at all, not to mention eldest young sir's position as the heir nor your position as the young general of the Gu family's army, but just speaking of Her Highness the Princess as a subject, it's natural that I come out to receive her. Yu Fu listened to the two go back and forth and impatiently waved her hand. I did not come to the Prime Minister's manor today to talk about etiquette between subject and ruler. Moreover, I know that Prime Minister In has never thought of princesses as rulers. Isn't that right? In Shu Ah could hear the mocking tone in her words and knew that she was talking about Princess Danyang. Without faltering, he responded, Princess must be joking. Even between princesses, there are differences. How can the one in my manor be compared with you? Just as this was said, a tall figure quietly separated the two, as Gu Shubai stepped between them. To take such liberties with his fiancée in front of him, In Shua sure was a bright one. The two men stared at each other, as sparks seemingly flew between them. Yu Fu tugged his sleeve from behind. This was a habit that she had kept from when she was little. At that time, she was too small and could not reach Gu Shubai. Now that she was 14 years old, she was tall enough to reach his shoulder. However, she could not change this habit. In Shua saw this intimate action, and his pupils immediately contracted. This one little movement was enough to drive him mad with jealousy, and he was no longer able to maintain his facade of courtesy. Eldest brother, you chat with Prime Minister In. As Yu Fu said this, she poked her head out from behind him and looked at In Shua. The Prime Minister's manor should have a female master who can receive female guests, right? A female master. Did she want to see Princess Danyang, In Jiao, or both? Inshua smiled. He was not worried about the two of them being able to cause any waves. Naturally, I will immediately have someone bring Princess to the eastern courtyard. Eldest young sir, come with me. The two went in different directions. One went east and one went west. When they parted ways, they shared a tacit look and felt reassured. Inshua walked in front of Gushubai and led the way. His hands were balled up into fists inside his large sleeves. This was the first time that Yu Fu had come to the Prime Minister's manor. Her impression of Inshua and Yin Yin was that they both had profound schemes and ulterior motives. The Prime Minister's manor that she had imagined was frighteningly dark and gloomy. She did not think that she would really come here. Looking at it now, it was indeed refined with exquisite pavilions. She had heard that the Yin family was a family that had been a scholarly family for generations. Compared to Marquis Gu's manor, which had a military background, the Prime Minister's manor was a bit less grand, but had a bit more elegance. Before arriving at the eastern courtyard, a familiar figure came over to receive her. Yu Fu. Yin Jiao was standing on the path and had been waiting for some time. Pei was the only one standing behind her. Seeing Yu Fu, she happily came forward. Jiao. Yu Fu had many questions to ask her, but found it hard to speak in front of the servants of the Prime Minister's manor. Yin Jiao understood and said to the servant, "You can go. Allow me to take care of Princess." The servant hesitantly said, "That?" But eldest young sir told this servant to bring Princess Junjiang to see Princess Danyang. Yin Jiao fiercely said, "Wasn't eldest sister-in-law unfit to see guests? As the only young miss in the manor, could it be that I am unable to take care of guests for her?" The servant was frightened and hastily retreated. After he left, Yin Jiao was like a cat that had escaped danger, slowly putting away her claws. Yu Fu could not help but laugh. "You gave me a fright. When did you become so mighty?" Yin Jiao helplessly said, "It's all just an act. I am doing my best to make myself stronger. It would be great if I could be half as strong as you. Then I wouldn't need to worry about being bullied." Yu Fu looked her over and felt that the current Yin Jiao was very different. She was no longer dressed plainly and in thin clothes. Instead, she wore clothes that showed off her status as the young miss of the Prime Minister's manor. Her face was a little rounder, and she no longer shrank away when others looked at the scar on her forehead. The gauze that covered the scar was still there, but her face was radiant and no longer looked sickly like it did in the past. Yu Fu praised her from the bottom of her heart. "You truly have the demeanor of a female general." "Really?" Yin Jiao rejoiced but quickly covered her mouth and looked around. "It's inconvenient to speak here. Come and speak in my courtyard. I will take you to see Danyang in a bit. You might have some way of treating her illness." Yu Fu did not refuse, following her to her courtyard. Entering the room, they closed the door, and Yin Jiao quickly grabbed her hand. "I wasn't able to go into the palace last night, but I heard that His Majesty wanted to appoint you as Empress in front of all of the officials and that you refused?" Because of this, none of the members of Marquis Gu's manor was able to sleep well last night. First thing this morning, Head General went into the palace, and I accompanied eldest brother here to see your eldest brother." "My eldest brother?" Yin Jiao heard those words and subconsciously felt uneasy. He hates Marquis Gu's manor even more than His Majesty. He won't help you. But if it's concerning you, he might be willing to help. Yu Fu looked around the room. After the previous Prime Minister returned, your eldest brother surely does not dare to trouble you. Princess Danyang is also able to have a happier existence. This is a good thing. Yin Jiao hastily said, "At a time like this, how can you still be worried about us? Right now, your matters are most important. If you don't want to become the Empress, I have an idea." Yu Fu said, "What is it?" Yin Jiao said, "After word of what happened in the palace last night reached the manor, I was worshipping our ancestors in the ancestral hall with Father. At that time, Father let out a sigh and said, Yu Fu said, 'Go ahead and say it. I won't get mad no matter what the previous Prime Minister said.'" Only then did Yin Jiao resolve herself. Father is an extremely old-fashioned person. Back when he wanted me to get close to the second young sir, it was for the sake of learning about your identity. After hearing about what happened in the palace, Father was very angry and said that His Majesty actually wants to appoint a girl with an unclear background as empress. This absolutely cannot happen. Yu Fu's eyes lit up as she laughed instead of getting angry. He really said that? Yin Jiao nodded and looked at Yu Fu in confusion. She was laughing? If others heard this, they might be furious, so how could Yu Fu laugh? Yu Fu cheerfully said, "Your father is right. I am a girl with an unclear background. Even if the Empress of Eastern Ling does not come from an aristocratic family, she should be innocent and come from a prominent family. As for me, I am just an adopted daughter of Marquis Gu's manor. Though I have been accorded the title of princess, I do not have the imperial family's blood." Did the previous prime minister say how to stop His Majesty? It turned out that she was rejoicing over this. Yin Jiao quickly said, "Though father does not want you to be empress, he has already retired from court. That he was able to return to the capital is already thanks to His Majesty's grace, so how could he dare to speak up on this matter?" Father returned from the old home looking much older. I fear that even if he had the will, he would not have the power to do anything. Though the previous prime minister has retired from court, his prestige is still there. With how much His Majesty favors Prime Minister Yin, he will surely give the previous prime minister some face. How about this, Jiao? Why don't you bring me to see him? Yin Jiao was extremely shocked and said, "You want to see father?" She thought to herself that aside from the members of Marquis Gu's manor, Yin Yin might be the only one who does not want Yu Fu to become empress. Marquis Gu's manor was currently in a difficult position. If not for this, Gu Shubai would not have come to see Yin Shua. If Yin Yin could be persuaded by Yu Fu, he would be very helpful. She gritted her teeth. "When I was in trouble, Marquis Gu's manor took me in, and you treated the scar on my forehead. I have remembered that benevolence and will repay it. Very well, I will bring you to see my father." Yu Fu smiled and said, "That's great, but don't mention repaying the favor in the future. When third brother broke into the prime minister's manor, you were the one who helped him when he was nearly caught. The favors owed between you, Marquis Gu's manor, and I are too hard to keep track of, so you don't owe us anything." Yin Jiao looked at her. She knew that she could never repay the benevolence that Marquis Gu's manor had shown her. Yu Fu said this to allow her to feel a little better. The greatest gift that they had given her was telling her the truth about her identity. They allowed her to know that she was not born of a prostitute, but was born of a female general from Western Kuan. Her birth mother had been a powerful female general, so why did she have to be submissive and meek? Why could she not be daring and brave like her birth mother? She was slowly changing and becoming a brave and righteous person. Chapter 359. Forgive son for not being able to follow orders, master. Young Miss brought Princess here saying that she wants to see you. The servant bowed and reported from outside the door. Inside the small study of the main hall, Yin Yin was currently writing something. Hearing this report, he did not even bother raising his head. Quickly invite them in. We're family, so why bother with the courtesy? The servant quickly said, "Master, it's not our manor's princess. It's Princess Junjiang." Princess came with the eldest young sir of Marquis Gu's manor, saying that they had something to discuss with eldest young sir. The brush in Yin Yan's hand froze, as he lifted his head to look at the servant. He then slowly put his brush on a rack. "Princess Junjiang wants to see me. Did you hear young Miss say what for? If it's just a plain visit, there's no need. She is a female guest, so she should be received by the young Miss or Princess Danielle. There's no need for her to see me." The servant thought for a bit. Young Miss said that they came to see Master to talk about something. It did not seem to be a plain visit. Will Master see her? Yin Yin put away the things on his desk and slowly said, "She is a princess, while I am just a retired former prime minister. How could I refuse? Invite her in." Putting his things away, he walked out. "I will see the guests in the main hall." "Yes, master." Yin Jiao led Yu Fu into the main hall. There, she saw an old man who had become so thin that he was nothing but skin and bones. Despite being just a few years older than Gu Huaijiang, he looked like he was much older. Seeing Yu Fu, he slowly stood up with the help of his cane. In the end, he was someone who had been prime minister for multiple decades. He maintained a calm demeanor and did not show too much respect to the so-called princess. Yu Fu instantly moved forward and stopped him. "Former prime minister, there's no need to be so courteous. You are the elder. We can speak while sitting." Yin Yin did not refuse. "Then princess, please sit. Princess is a noble guest. Jiao, quickly bring out some tea for princess." Bringing out tea was usually left to the servants, and the prime minister's manor was not a place that did not see noble guests visited in the past. Yin Yin had never had Yin Jiao personally bring tea out for a guest before. This was not out of respect for Yu Fu's status. It was clearly to get rid of her. Yin Jiao was hoping to say a few words to support Yu Fu and naturally did not want to leave. "Father, princess is an easygoing person. There's no need." Yin Yin shot a sharp glance at her. "Why haven't you gone yet?" Yin Jiao looked at Yu Fu's expression, and the latter slightly nodded to her. Bowing, she left. After dismissing everyone, Yin Yan's expression became even stranger. For princess to have come to see this old man, what is the reason for it? He was very direct. Thus Yu Fu expressed her thoughts directly. "Former Prime Minister has surely heard about what happened in the palace last night. His Majesty is still young and occasionally has wild ideas that are in need of an older official to advise on. I wonder if former Prime Minister has any intention of advising him on this matter?" Yin Yan's expression did not change. "Princess must be joking. This old man has not been a court official in a long time. I am now nothing more than an old man. How could I have the ability to advise His Majesty? Not to mention advising His Majesty, but this old man doesn't even know about what happened in the palace last night." He cleanly pushed back, but Yin Jiao had already sold him out. Yu Fu smiled. "Former Prime Minister, why bother being so wary of me? I know that former Prime Minister can't possibly be ignorant of what happened in the palace last night, as news has already reached most people in the capital. More importantly, former Prime Minister, doesn't the Prime Minister's manor currently wield the most influence in the capital?" A flicker of light flashed through Yin Yan's eyes, but he did not speak. Yu Fu continued, "Former Prime Minister and Head General have always been at odds, and I am Head General's adopted daughter, so it's natural that former Prime Minister does not tell the truth. It's just that while former Prime Minister does not trust Head General has always had faith in your ability and bearing as a Prime Minister. Head General and I are the same. We believe in your loyalty and believe that you can't possibly be indifferent to His Majesty's wanton actions." Yin Yan's expression softened slightly. "Marquis Gu appraised this old one in such a way?" Yu Fu replied honestly, "Yes, Head General has never been hostile toward former Prime Minister. On the contrary, he has always felt that while you were in office, you managed the court situation very well and could shoulder that heavy responsibility." Only now did Yin Yin start sizing up Yu Fu in earnest. On the first day of the new year, she wore a plain white dress with a black cloak on top. She looked elegant and pure. To others, this style of dress might look taboo. However, to Yin Yin, it was very comforting. He knew that she was paying respects to the late emperor. A princess who did not have the late emperor's blood was willing to conceal her natural beauty for the sake of mourning the late emperor. Yet Ning Chengji was busy feasting during the palace banquet. He slowly opened his mouth, his voice softer than before. "I had heard that Princess persuaded His Majesty to have a more moderate banquet to show respect to the late emperor, and I heard that you refused His Majesty's intention to appoint you Empress. I will tell Princess a few truths today, but it's not for Marquis Gu's sake. Instead, it's because of Princess filial feelings for the late emperor and for Princess integrity." Yin Yin finally let out a sigh of relief. Yu Fu also let out a sigh of relief. She said, "Since that's the case, I will tell former Prime Minister the truth. I am someone who was engaged to the heir to Marquis Gu's manor by the late emperor, and it is disrespectful for the child to go against the father's wishes, and His Majesty's actions are truly disrespectful of the late emperor's will. If former Prime Minister also feels this way, could you write a letter to His Majesty to change his mind?" Only after hearing this did Yin Yin dare to ascertain that Yu Fu had come to ask him to dissuade His Majesty from appointing her as Empress. If she had even the slightest desire for the Empress position, she would not have come to ask him, an enemy of Marquis Gu's manor. Yin felt that his past view of her had been too inaccurate. The girl that he had viewed as having an unclear origin and uncertain motives actually had such a disdain for power. Yin quietly reflected on himself. He, an adult in his 50s, could not compare with Yu Fu, a girl who was not even as tall as his hair was long. This was truly embarrassing. He thought for a moment, as a subject, it is natural to advise His Majesty on his unrighteous actions. But hasn't Princess sought out the wrong person? This old man is now unemployed and powerless. Even if I submitted a letter, would His Majesty listen to me? Marquis Gu has a wide number of contacts in court, like Lord Ji and the members of the cabinet. Princess should have them advise His Majesty. Yu Fu said, former Prime Minister is one of them. Naturally, you know whom His Majesty currently trusts the most. The cabinet was established by the late Emperor, but it has already been rendered powerless. Lord Ji is already older, and Head General has already gone into the palace today to see His Majesty. There are surely some righteous subjects in court, so this matter looks very promising. Yan's heart was swayed, as he fell deep into thought. Gu Shubai and Yin Shuo sat across from each other in the outer study and sipped tea. This was his first time coming to the Prime Minister's manor. Looking around, the corners of his lips twitched, while something seemed to be on his mind. Yin Shuo seemed to have an idea of what he was thinking. Is eldest young sir wondering why I would invite you to a place as important as the outer study? While saying this, he pushed a freshly poured cup of tea toward Gu Shubai. Gu Shubai smiled. Do the other officials that visit the Prime Minister's manor not also come to the outer study? For example, what about Lord Lu Luzhan from the Board of Civil Office? Yin Shuo carefully looked at him. Unexpectedly, he was examining the Prime Minister's manor without any reservation in front of him. Gu Shubai said, Prime Minister Yin, why bother looking at me like this? When it comes to familiarity with each other's manner, Prime Minister Yin has a bit more familiarity. Yin Shuo also smiled. That's right. This is thanks to Lord Marquis Gu's generosity. In the past, General and Prime Minister did not get along. His father didn't even bother putting on a front, never inviting anyone from Marquis Gu's manor to the manor. Lord Marquis Gu was different, inviting all members of the court whenever there was a banquet. Not even the Prime Minister's manor was excluded. It's thanks to Lord Marquis Gu's invitations that I became more and more familiar with Marquis Gu's manor. Whether my father was putting on a front or genuinely hoping for peace with the Prime Minister's manor to provide peace for Eastern Ling, you should know. He permitted someone who schemed to have me killed to come and plead for forgiveness in front of the manor in such a pretentious manner. It was in hopes that you would manage to take over for the former Prime Minister in taking care of Eastern Ling. Gu Shubai was secretly letting him know that they knew that Yin Shuo was the one behind the assassination attempt in Changzhou. However, they allowed Yin Shuo to resign. Yin Shuo faintly smiled. The times had changed. He was not afraid of Gu Shubai bringing up old matters. I have never suspected Lord Marquis Gu's loyalty. As for eldest young sir, may I know the reason that eldest young sir has decided to grace me with your presence today? Gu Shubai lifted his teacup, while Yin Shuo quietly waited for him to reply. It seemed that he knew what he wanted to say. Everyone knows that Prime Minister Yin is an emotionless person, but is this true or fake? Yin Shuo froze, not expecting him to ask about this. Everyone? It's just Ji Yao who says it. So what if I am emotionless or have emotions? Eldest young sir claims to be an affectionate person, but how do we know if that affection would last? I am not talking about myself. I am talking about Yu Fu. Yin Shuo's expression immediately changed, and Gu Shubai took note of it. No matter how much he might feign ignorance, he could not escape the truth, even if that expression only lasted for a second. Yin Shuo did his best to calm his expression. Eldest young sir came because of what happened during last night's palace banquet. His Majesty wants to appoint Yu Fu as Empress. Marquis Gu's manor is a loyal family that cannot go against an imperial decree. Eldest young sir has truly been put in a difficult situation and has no choice but to come to me for help. His speaking about loyalty sounded mockingly sarcastic. Gu Shubai smiled and said, When have I asked you for help? After confessing your feelings to Yu Fu on your wedding day, could it be that Prime Minister Yin now feels indifferent to His Majesty's plans? Yin Shua lost a third of his overbearing aura. Yu Fu did not hide anything from Gu Shubai, even telling him such a private secret, yet she never treated him this way. Thinking of how the two spent their days together under one roof and how intimate they could be, Yin Shua felt as though a fire was about to erupt from his chest. He coldly said, "I do like you, Fu, but you can just give up. I won't help you change His Majesty's mind." Yin Shua refused so resolutely in a way that Gu Shubai had not expected. He paused for a moment and understood Yin Shua's feelings. He resented Marquis Gu's manner. At the same time, he understood that nobody in Marquis Gu's manor wanted to see Yu Fu appointed as empress. Even if an imperial decree came, Marquis Gu's manor would stand in front to block it. Yin Shua could just sit back and reap the benefits. He could just sit back and watch Marquis Gu's manor and Ning Chengji fight to the death. Gu Shubai sneered. "It seems that I overestimated your love of Yu Fu. Yu Fu clearly told you back then that she would neither be a concubine nor a second wife. Yet you still chose to marry Princess Danyang for the sake of power. It truly is not worth it for Prime Minister Yin to risk infuriating His Majesty over such a cheap love." After saying this, he stood up. It seemed that he no longer wanted to continue speaking to Yin Shua. Yin Shua immediately stood up. "Don't think that you truly love Yu Fu. I have liked her from the first moment that I saw her. My love for her is not any less than what you feel for her. It's just a pity that it was Marquis Gu's manor that adopted her and not the Prime Minister's manor. If she was engaged to me, I would have done anything to convince His Majesty not to appoint her as empress." Gu Shubai smiled with a bit of disdain. "Prime Minister Yin, why bother deceiving yourself? If you were the one engaged to Yu Fu, you would still be just as unwilling to give up your title and power. That's why you would definitely be unable to have her. Even if you had her, you would not be able to protect her. You are only capable of protecting your power and your isolation." Yin Shua could no longer restrain himself, as his entire body trembled. The ones that he allegedly had were nothing more than Princess Danyang and Yin Jiyao. One was a wife who did not love him, and one was a sister whom he had used and abused. He did not care about them. Yin Shua suddenly laughed. "Eldest young sir, there's no need to act so aggressively. Since you like Yu Fu, you should be prepared to give everything for her. I won't go and see His Majesty for you." "And if I tell you to go?" An old voice suddenly came from the entrance to the study. Yin Shua was stunned, as the door to the study was pushed open. Yin Yin had been standing outside the door and listening for quite some time, and Yu Fu was standing behind him. The two then entered the study. Thinking of how everything that he had just said was heard by Yin Yin and Yu Fu, Yin Shua's embarrassment quickly turned to anger as he looked at the servant outside. "Why did you not report when father and princess came?" The servant lowered his head and bowed in fear, not daring to answer. Yin Yin leaned on his cane. He was old but still maintained his dignity. "It's not his fault. I told him not to report. What? Can I no longer tell the servants what to do in my own manner?" These words carried a faint hint of disapproval for Yin Shua's actions, and Yin Shua quickly cupped his hands and said, "Father, son would never dare to insinuate that. What I meant was, it's fine as long as that's not what you meant. Close the door." Yin Yin turned around and fiercely shouted. The servant immediately closed the door. Gu Shubai was surprised that Yu Fu and Yin Yin had appeared at the same time. He looked at Yu Fu, and Yu Fu gave him a reassuring look. Their nonverbal communication was noticed by Yin Shua, and his expression slightly changed. Yin Yin noticed this and resented his lack of growth. The son whom he had always been proud of was actually just like the other emotional and sentimental young sirs, having developed feelings for Yu Fu. It was no wonder he had gone behind his back to have Gu Shubai assassinated in Changzhou. It turned out that it was not to help him, but because of his own jealousy. The thing that he could tolerate even less was, "Shuar, why did you not agree to eldest young sir's request?" Yin Shua frowned. In front of Yu Fu, he could not repeat what he had just said. He looked at Yin Yin with difficulty. He did not know what had possessed him today, actually making things difficult for him in front of outsiders, especially those from Marquis Gu's manor. Right? It was surely because Yu Fu had said something to Yin Yin. There's no need for you to look at Princess. Just tell father. Why do you not want to accept eldest young sir's request? Yin Shua bit the bullet and said, hasn't father always disliked Marquis Gu's manor? Why do you hope that son would help them today? Yin Yin tapped his cane on the floor. That is a personal resentment. How could that be more important than the country's affairs? His Majesty wants to appoint a girl who is already engaged to the position of Empress. A ruler stealing a subject's wife is something that will surely be heavily criticized by future generations. As Prime Minister, how can you not advise His Majesty? When it came to duty as an official, Yin Yin had never made a mistake. Sure enough, he and Yin Shua were different types of people. Having been censured by his own father, Yin Shua felt extremely troubled. He knew that as long as he took a step back, many things would be lost. He could not take a step back. Even if Yin Yin, his own father, told him to step back, he could not do it. He cupped his hands and quietly said, Father, please forgive son for not being able to obey. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.